You're watching the ZNS Network, the People's Station.
Pageantry, procedures, and protocols. Good morning, everyone. I'm Makush Lapinder, and welcome to our pre-show of the 2023 opening of Parliament, a time-honored tradition that dates all the way back to 1729 here in the Bahamas. My co-host this morning, Julian Reed.
Good morning, Makushla.
Good morning. Julian, we're back here to another opening of Parliament 2 years after we were in the same spot. That time, though, it was following a dissolution of Parliament. We're here following the prorogation of Parliament. Not the same thing, so there'll be sprinkles of differences throughout this morning's ceremony.
Yes, but we have a 294-year-old system, as you pointed out, coming from 1729, which proves how stable our parliamentary democracy is. And such variations are normalities in systems such as ours. Look at the UK, for example, where they do this almost every year. So we don't expect to see too much different, just a new legislative agenda, which really governments should do regularly.
Well, joining us in studio is former House Speaker, Dr. Kendall Major. Dr. Major, welcome to the broadcast.
Delight to be here, Pakrishna and Julian.
Yes.
Looking forward to our discussion today.
And it's a delight to have you on this side of the opening of Parliament, this time around as a spectator and not as a participant. And I think I'm safe in presuming that it takes away some of the apprehension and anxiety that comes along with ceremonies of this magnitude, the sitting and the standing and all that comes along with it.
Absolutely. The last time I was involved actively in the opening of Parliament is when I was being inducted as Speaker, and that was after a general election. That was a lot of pomp and pageantry and a tremendous amount of anxiety because the weight of the office is carried by many of the members of Parliament and senators. This is a really exciting time in our country because it really demonstrates our democracy and the stability of our democracy, but it's also a solemn time too. So it's a bit of a contrast between celebratory and also solemnity. And so I think you would see pretty much the same things that happen in an opening of Parliament after a general election, maybe a bit abbreviated, but the same thing would happen after a prorogation and also a dissolution.
Now, Julian spoke to, in England, this happens every year.
Often, yeah.
I think we're taking steps to get there. We're not quite there yet, of course. This after the Davis administration's 2 years in office. However, there are some who would say this caught them by surprise. What do you say to that?
Well, the late Queen Elizabeth II, she led 67 openings of Parliament, and the new king, the 7th of November will be his first. It is quite common in the House of Commons or in Britain's Parliament to do this. It may have been by surprise only because we are not used to it and we have not been comfortable with it, but it is a normal part of an agenda of a prime minister to just take a pause and adapt and put forward a new legislative agenda because things happen and things change. And so a little surprise, maybe, but if I'm advised that this will happen again before the next general election. And so I think after it happens again, as I mentioned, it happened during the pending administration over his 20 years of assuming leadership. So it is not so uncommon, but it is an opportunity to showcase our stability, the pride in our heritage, but also the importance of what it means to the Bahamian people in our democracy and the work that needs to be done to touch the lives of Bahamians.
Well, Dr. Major, I would think that if you're paying attention, you should be having legislative agendas change over periods of time. For example, we, of course, had COVID, we had Dorian, different demands, different circumstances as we move out of those periods.
Correct.
So we should definitely be having a new legislative agenda.
Yes, agendas, a policy or a bill, if it doesn't accomplish most of its objectives, then it should fall away, and it gives you an opportunity to step back, look, introduce a new bill, make an amendment to a bill, reintroduce a bill, and so it cleans the slate, so to speak, and it allows for reintroduction of a new agenda. And you, the opposition, of course, will be in a position to hold the government as accountable as they should. And so I don't see it really as a big surprise. I think what the key is what happens next. Where are we going, and how is this new agenda will be followed?
And how will the people feel the effects of it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Dr. Major, you served as House Speaker for 5 years.
Correct.
There are many people, well, there are some people, who they don't understand the importance of a speaker. They don't know what the role entails. You wear a robe, you sit high, you make rulings, but I'm sure there's more to it.
Absolutely. The Speaker's role is extremely critical to the democracy. It is extremely critical in the relationship between the entire Parliament, whether it's the members of Parliament, the executive, both opposition and members. The Speaker has no friends, but should be friendly with everyone. And so the Speaker's position is extremely lonely, because he or she plays the role of a pastor, a counselor, a school teacher, a principal, and a judge. And so you play all these roles, and it's much to bear with respect to managing the various personalities that come with the office.
Which really lends to the importance of the role of the Speaker being
Absolutely.
independent. At this juncture, though, we will go to downtown in Parliament Square, more specifically, where our Shashina Rowe-Farquharson is standing by. Shashina?
Good morning, Julian, and good morning, Makushla. We are coming to you live from inside the tent that is outside the halls of Parliament. Today, of course, is one of the most highly anticipated events in our country's history. 2 years ago, though, we came to you live from the Baha Convention Center. Fast forward to today, it is certainly a beautiful occasion where we are back to the place of tradition, a place that is filled with history. And of course, we have the highly anticipated event that is filled with all of the pomp and pageantry. Now, what is also important to note, in 2021, 39 of the members of Parliament would have taken that oath of allegiance. Today, unfortunately, it is 38 due to the sudden death of the late Minister of Social Services, Information and Broadcasting, and the member of West Grand Bahama and Bimini, the Honorable Obadiah Welshcombe. Well, it is expected to be announced shortly this morning, the appointment of a new leader of government business who is expected to fill the role upon Cabinet's announcement and fill the position of the Honorable Obadiah Welshcombe. I remember in 2021, I had an opportunity to speak with Welshcombe shortly before the opening of Parliament, and he was really excited about the role. He was excited about parliamentary procedures and bringing back the organization to the halls of Parliament. Now, historically, leader of government business is someone who is a senior cabinet minister. It is also someone who knows the parliamentary procedure and someone who's respected by both sides, the government as well as the opposition. Well, Cabinet believes that Minister Munro is that person who is able to fill those shoes, and it's a very big shoe to be filled. Wayne Munro, Casey, is an eminent and a prominent lawyer in the Bahamas, and he's also a noted civil litigator. He's known for his innovative approach and is sought after for complex and groundbreaking cases, including the cases of those who have suffered injustice by the state. Well, this morning, once again, that announcement is expected to be made here inside the tent. We already have a number of persons who are seated. Some of those persons would have been here from 8 o'clock this morning. We have the clergy as well as other government and dignitaries. Also standing by live by the Senate is our Jiminita Swain. Jiminita.
In Parliament Square, that's where I'm stationed, and I can give you an idea of what will take place in the Senate at about 10 o'clock. So what will happen is the senators will assemble in the chamber. The president and her procession will enter the chamber. Of course, we have to start everything with prayer, so there will be a session for prayer. And then the president will appoint a 3-member committee that will be made up of 2 government senators, 1 senator from the opposition. They will then be dispatched to wait on the Governor General. Now, within that time, the committee departs for the House of Assembly, the government house, pardon me. The president will make a communication. That should be about 5 or 10 minutes. And then she will also name the sessional committee that at that time or somewhere around in that time, that committee will return, and then eventually processions will make their way for the speech from the throne, except receiving the Governor General and allowing her to get in place where preparations will begin for her to begin with her speech from the throne. So a lot of activity happening here, guests arriving and ensuring that they're taking their seats. But again, this is team coverage, so I toss it now over to Sean Innes, who is also standing by. Good morning, Sean.
We're here in the main hall where, of course, we are awaiting the opening of the House of Assembly and, of course, in the precincts of the Senate and Parliament Street. It is a beehive of activity. Chief Protocol Officer Terry Archer and his dutiful officers, all dressed in black, are doing their best to, of course, arrange seating and place all of the dignitaries in their respective seats. Leaders of the Christian Council have already been seated behind me, as you can see, and of course the perimeter is secure and safe. There are any number of armed to the teeth Defense Force and Royal Bahamas Police Force officers who are doing their best to secure the premises, and of course it's happening right now. It is beautifully adorned with the flora and fauna, the greenery, as it's expected, and of course also too the speech from the throne will be delivered by the Honorable Lady Cynthia Mother Pratt today, and of course that is what we are waiting for here in Parliament, in the Parliament Square. And so, again, we thank you for tuning in. We invite you to remain tuned in, and we take you back to the studio with Julian Reed and Makushla.
Well, thanks, Sean. That's our team down there in Parliament Square, made up of Shashina Rowe-Farquharson, Jiminita Swain, and Sean Innes. As you saw on the screen just a few moments ago, guests are beginning to arrive to the opening of Parliament. We see there that spectators have already began lining on the sides of both sides of the street, or whatever space is available, to seal a spot to witness what will take place later this morning. And we've also seen that among the invited guests, or among the guests turning out this morning, is Dame Marguerite Pinling, one of our former Governor General.
Yeah, someone that we need to be proud of as a statesperson, if you will. I think what's so good, though, to have the average public person come out and witness this is because, well, definitely as far as the House of Assembly is concerned, these are people that they voted for and put into Parliament.
And this is
so
the People's
Square. They should
be
there to give them, it is. You know, this represents all of what we are, at least it should be.
I think an important point that Shashina made is that, you know, like you noted, Dr. Major, this is a time for celebration, but it's a time to also, the government is going into a new parliamentary session with a cloud of gloom, so to speak, in the death of its former leader of government business. You know, they've also lost a cabinet minister and also an MP in the person of Obi Bolshcom. To add even another layer to that, they have a senior cabinet minister who's mourning the death of his wife. Both deaths just a day apart.
Just a day apart, absolutely.
You know, so it's a lot to take in for the government as they map forward without one person while another is mourning the death of a close relative.
Well, even in the midst of tragedy, we must go on.
Yeah.
We must continue doing the business of the people and the country.
It is really a difficult duality to walk, and I guess we would say in the Bahamas, walk and chew gum at the same time. It just brought me to Senator Dianne Feinstein, who just passed in San Francisco, senator, and another senator is already appointed, and that was literally within a week. And it just makes you realize that governance must continue, and it is continuous. We must mourn, and so a government leader must be appointed. The late Obadiah Wilshcombe will be interred, and there will be a by-election, and the business of government will continue. But in our context in the Bahamas, we tend to take this a little bit more personally because these are our family members and these are friends who we grew up with, and so we take a little bit longer. But the job must heal, yeah. But the job must get done. Yeah.
And like Shashina noted, the new leader of government business will be Wayne Munro. We heard going into Parliament that, you know, there's a small pool because it must be a seasoned person, a senior person. I think in that pool, one former cabinet minister placed in that pool, Alfred Sayers, Glenys Hannah Martin, and also Fred Mitchell. Coming out, though, of course, is Wayne Munro. Stress to us the importance of the leader of government business. I know it's an incredible task, and he liaises with both the clerk of the House as well as the House Speaker.
Absolutely. In fact, the leader of government business is not a paid position. It is an appointed position of tremendous esteem by the Prime Minister and or the leader of the opposition. So that person should be competent, should be experienced, very much a savvy communicator, a person who's able to get along on both sides, who understands the proceedings of Parliament, who's committed to being present and early, who's committed to being organized. That is a critically important role. I think the Honourable Wayne Munro would certainly do a wonderful job. On the face of it, though, I'm a little surprised that he was chosen because he is a fairly novice.
He's a first-timer,
exactly,
which is what...
persons like Glenys Hannah Martin and Alfred Sayers, names came up, and Alfred Sayers being a constitutional expert, and Glenys being a very, very able-bodied and intelligent person. But Wayne is a fast learner. Honourable Wayne Munro was an extremely fast learner, and he has quickly developed himself to be regarded as a senior. And I think because of his seniority at the bar over the many years, it made it very easy for him to just mesh right in and understand the role. This is going to be extremely critical a role, and he's going to have to work very closely with the clerk and also the opposition to get things done.
And with the Speaker as well. What is the sort of role between...
The Speaker comes in every day, and the first person when the House meets is the first person the Speaker wants to talk to is the government leader, because the government leader would walk in and inform the Speaker of this is the intention today. And from that process, they sit down and iron out how the proceedings will continue on. And so the Speaker will will converse with the government leader more than any single person, even more than the Prime Minister.
Now, a little while back you spoke about the challenges of saying that the Speaker is on his own, or on her own, if you will. But how do you deal with the issue of balance and fairness, right, in that role as Speaker, particularly if you're appointed by such a big majority of government members and a real small minority of opposition members?
That's always a challenge. There are many instances where the Speaker will not be very comfortable around some of the government members and the opposition based on the ruling. You're judged by every ruling you make, but it comes with the territory, and members should expect. What ought to drive the Speaker is the rules, knowing and being a fidelity of the rules, and also just and personal character. If they hold those two as critical and important as the driving force for every decision, then they will be able to stand the test of time, because every day will be very different, and every day someone will be unhappy with you, and sometimes they take it personal. And so the Speaker has to rise above the fray and essentially determine that they will show their fidelity to the rules and their own personal character.
Well, I think in the 2 years that she's held down the role, Patricia DeVoe, the Member of Parliament for Bamboo Town, could certainly attest to what you're saying right now.
She would agree with me, absolutely.
Right now we're going to David Forbes, Chief Clerk of the House of Assembly, who gives us some insight on the proceedings of Parliament.
The parliamentarians, that's House of Assembly members and senators, they will assemble in their respective chambers. And then, of course, each house will dispatch a 3-member committee to Her Excellency the Governor General. The committee from the Senate will inform the Governor General that they are awaiting her attendance in the Senate chamber in Parliament Square. The House of Assembly Committee will be informing the Governor General that the Speaker and the House members are awaiting her command to attend the Senate chamber in Parliament Square. And they will both return and advise the presiding officer that they have carried out her instructions. The Senate will then adjourn to Parliament Square and await for the arrival of the Governor General. The Governor General will arrive, inspect the honor guard, and ascend the throne. Immediately thereafter, the Governor General will instruct the Black Rod from the Senate to command the attendance of the members of the House of Assembly to the Senate chamber in Parliament Square. The Black Rod will then approach the chamber, rap on the door. He would be allowed in, and he will approach the bar, and he will inform the Speaker that the Governor General is awaiting the attendance or command the attendance of the House of Assembly, the Speaker with members of the House of Assembly in the Senate chamber in Parliament Square. Then, of course, the Speaker's procession will be led by the mace. The mace will be first the Speaker, then the clerks, Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, and members of the House of Assembly. In order of precedence, of course. We will all assemble in the Senate chamber in Parliament Square. You will notice that while everybody, including the senators and the judiciary, will be seated, the Prime Minister, the Speaker, and members of the House of Assembly will stand for the duration of their speech from the throne. Once we arrive in the square, the Prime Minister will proceed to the throne and present the Governor General with the speech from the throne. He will resume his position in the lineup next to the Speaker's procession, and the reading of the speech from the throne will commence. After the speech from the throne is finished, the Governor General will then depart. After the Governor General departs, the House of Assembly, the Speaker and members of the House of Assembly will also depart. And then, of course, everybody else will fall out. The House of Assembly will resume its meetings. The senators, the President and the senators will then reassemble in the Senate chamber and, of course, take care of further House meeting matters. And after the House is either adjourned or suspended, everybody will proceed to Government House.
Quite a lengthy process there, gentlemen, but there is tremendous significance in the opening of Parliament.
No doubt about it. The opening of Parliament carries a tradition for hundreds of years, and each item, as the Chief Clerk spoke about, plays a role with defining our democracy and showing the unity of powers, but yet the separation of powers. So the opening of Parliament is an opportunity for all of the branches of governments to come together in a unified, stable manner. But it also signifies that there's a separation, that the Senate, which will act as the sovereign or the representation of the Crown, and so the Governor General will speak from the Senate, and the House of Assembly and its members will come to the Senate, and that's why they would stand and not sit, because they are outsiders. So they are essentially at the bar of the Senate while the speech from the throne is being read. All of that came from years of thousands of years through the House of Commons, through the British Parliament, where the king in the past wanted to infiltrate Parliament, and because of the separation of wars, and in fact, it started with King Charles I. He was beheaded, and in the 1700s, and from that period, there was a separation. And so what you're seeing play out is the separation, but yet unity in spirit.
Okay, we see on our screen just a few minutes ago that additional guests are arriving or are already there. We see Bishop Neil Ellis, members of the clergy, really. We see the head of the Methodist Church. We also see head of the Catholic Diocese, Archbishop Patrick Pinder, as well as Bishop Laish Boyd. We also saw earlier former Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham, as well as former President of the Senate, Lynn Holowesko. And as you can see right now, other guests are filling up the space. A pretty big tent that expands from Victoria, the statue of Queen Victoria, to the bust of Sir Milo. So the government made every attempt to have as many people witness this opening of Parliament this morning.
And I think the real good thing for those people who are there today is that this tent is air conditioned.
It's an air conditioned tent.
I don't know, you know, having worked out in
terms of the humidity and the heat. Right now we'll take our broadcast back to Parliament Square where our Jiminita Swain is standing by. Jimmy?
Well, obviously, on a big day such as this, security plays a major factor. A lot of preparation goes into planning and to ensure that every detail is managed. And, of course, to tell us a little bit about security happening today is, of course, Chief Superintendent Crystal Skippings. She's also the Police Press Liaison Officer. Good morning, Ms. Skippings. I see quite a number of officers, not just police officers, but RBDF officers as well. Talk to us about how you prepared for today and the heightenedness of the security, I guess I could say.
And so, well, good morning, first of all, Jiminita. Good morning, Bahamas. We have been actually in preparation mode for the opening of Parliament for the past 6 to 8 weeks now. And so we've been meeting collaboratively with all agencies responsible, and in particular our colleagues from the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. And so today we've beefed up our presence, not just here in Rawson and Parliament Squares, but actually the entire perimeter. We have officers in place to ensure that this event goes off without any disruptions. We know that there may be some persons who may want to come down to Parliament to create disruption, and so we have placed all the necessary mechanisms in place, the necessary manpower at strategic points. We have officers in uniform and officers in plain clothes as well who are actually out here, and we're sifting through persons as they come to ensure that those persons who may seek to come onto Bay Street to cause disruption, that we're able to remove them very quickly so that the service can go on unhindered.
So there you have it, a lot of security in place to ensure that everything goes smoothly. Probably one of the larger events for the year so far as it relates to the opening of Parliament. But for now, back to you in studio, Makushla and Julian.
Well, thank you so much, Jiminita. Chief Superintendent Crystal Skippings there, reiterating a stern warning to all those who may want to disrupt this morning's opening of Parliament. Security down there, as you just heard, extremely tight to ensure that nothing awry happens. Now, pomp and pageantry, the order of the day for the opening of Parliament. We saw images of the fascinators and the brightly colored dresses. We haven't really seen a lot of the suits, so we can't speak to that. But what is the significance of the pomp and pageantry? I know you said, you know, despite the fact that this is a very serious occasion, despite the fact that we're dealing with the death of a senior cabinet minister, overall, it is a celebration. It is a celebration. At the very core of it, I think it is a celebration because it's a celebration of unity of the branches of government. We not often is the Senate, the House, and the Sovereign together in one place. And this is an opportunity to celebrate that because it shows that government is functioning. Whether we are not happy with the government or not, it shows that it's functioning, it's a vibrant democracy, and it is a necessary part to display this. Up until 1992, this happened in the Senate upstairs where nobody could have witnessed it. And then under Hubert Ingraham, there was government in the sunshine. He had it in the Parliament Square. Now, this is very unique because it's an air-conditioned Parliament Square, but they have, and Bahama, what they did is reenacted and made that the Senate. And today, the Senate is now in Parliament Square.
Of course, the circumstances were different back in 2021, but it's wonderful to be back in the square. This is what makes it truly national for, at least for someone like me. Yes. I believe there's. When it comes to the fashion, now in 2021, some of the members of Parliament, the female members of Parliament and cabinet ministers in particular, were just really taking fashion up quite a few notches.
Oh, well, you know,
So it's going to be interesting to see what we see today.
Yeah, it's not over yet. You'll see
you have your bright colored dresses, so you have to make sure not only your hat matches, but your mask at that point too,
Exactly.
because you wanna adhere to the COVID protocols. But hey, as a lady, as a man, you want to do so in style. Bahamians would have it no other way. Indeed. But we now go to our Shoshana Roe Farquharson, who is speaking, who came across a few UK visitors. Shoshana? Well, I would imagine that not only UK visitors are there watching this, probably quite a delight for anyone who is not a Bahamian resident or a citizen to pass the city square and to see something of this magnitude taking place, hey, and during my stay in the Bahamas.
Well, absolutely. Although UK residents, nationals, would be a little bit familiar with this because it comes from their system. But Americans would find this fascinating, very fascinating, because it's completely different than their system.
So if you're a tourist and you're visiting now, they would want to know about this. They would want to see this, hear about this, and this will be something special for them to witness.
Absolutely.
And also to talk about.
A question I posed to both Senator Barry Griffin and Dr. Dwayne Sands, former cabinet minister, last night. Things change. The laws are modernized, even the way people dress in terms of attending these ceremonies. Last year, be it because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we had this ceremony in Bahama. The invitation list seems to be swelling each time around, though. Do you think, despite that, it should remain in Parliament Square or maybe to a bigger venue? And this considering that Parliament Square has long been known as the People's Square, because Julian, you made a very fundamental point early in our broadcast.
The center of the city and the center of our democracy.
That kind of reminds me of when you have John Canoe question. And the nostalgics will say, at the heart of it, it must be down Bay Street. I'm a bit nostalgic. Parliament is considered the people's house. I think Parliament Square would be best. How this works will be an experiment that we'll be able to judge later. But I think it's wonderful to do it in Parliament Square. The fact that you're taking the elements into consideration with the rain and the sun, and having it in an air-conditioned tent, I think it's quite innovative and refreshing. So let's see the result of it. As long as, for me, as long as the majority of Bahamians can witness it either in person or through media.
And a lot of people are watching on our social media platform as well as live on television. We now go back to our Shoshana Roe Farquharson, who, as we indicated earlier, is standing by with some UK visitors. Shoshana?
Makushla and Julian, many persons were surprised back in August when the announcement came that the House would have been prorogued. Well, that's because this really didn't happen since 2006 under the Hubert Ingram administration. Well, one of the things that the former leader of government business, Obi Wilshcombe, talked about was not just an aggressive legislative approach, but he also talked about organizing the parliament structure and following the Westminster system. Today, I have a number of guests with me who are actually from the UK. And while we have not seen the House prorogued in a while, unless it was following a general election, today we have persons who witness in their country where this happens every year. Unfortunately, they have never seen it in person. Today, they are here in Nassau, and for the very first time, they're witnessing this and seeing this live. And let me tell you, they say that they are very impressed by what is happening here today. Just talk about this experience this morning.
Well, we've never seen what happens in the UK, but here I've been really impressed by the colour, the uniforms, it's just really impressive, the organisation, and we're very lucky. This is our first visit, and very lucky to be here.
First visit, and this is what you've experienced. So I'm guessing someone would have told you that we had the opening of Parliament today.
No, we didn't. It was just pure coincidence. We saw the cars coming and we wondered what's going on. So we started watching and it just got more and more interesting as more cars and more people started gathering. So really incredible.
Now, my question to you, Stephen, is the celebrations and the opening of Parliament in the UK, is it just as elaborate as this?
I think this is much more laid back, but very, very well organised. The UK, it's very hard to see it. You have to watch it on TV. You can't get this close. So it's really, really enjoyable.
And of course, I know you've been learning about our government, our party system with the Free National Movement, the Progressive Liberal Party, as I was explaining some of this to you, and you were taken aback. Talk a little bit about not just this experience, but this lasting a lifetime for you.
Yeah, it's our first visit as well, and I've never actually met these two people. We met there in the line, so it's a really good experience to have for their first time in Nassau. So it is, and from what you've told us as well about the parties and how it's organised.
Well, thank you so much. And of course, it's good to know that your first experience was right here in Nassau, Bahamas. Hopefully you get to experience this one day in your country. Back to you, Julian and Makushla.
Well, thanks, Shashina. We saw on our screen members of the judiciary. What's interesting is that we also saw a few high school students, government high school students, and I think the government, it's quite nice that October being Youth Month, and they sought to involve the youth of the country. And more and more events that we have, that is the case. During a lecture for the Botswana President, Masisi, that lecture was filled with high school students, a few sprinkles of UB students as well, but predominantly high school students. And, you know, that's very important to see how our democracy takes place, how events of this magnitude come together, and the importance of them as well.
Absolutely. They are the future leaders of our country. They need to know exactly what the country is based on, how it works, and, you know, sadly, a lot of people do not know how it works.
What we stand for, yes.
So it's good to see them there. I was very happy to see that.
I believe every state function should be special invitation for high school students on a rotational basis. It's a great education in civics, and it's an important opportunity for them to understand the Constitution and how it functions. Nothing like watching it firsthand play out, because you take back so many questions, and the experience is unforgettable. So it's really, really encouraging to see. I think there was government high school, government high school students present, and in good seats. Yeah, it was good.
I think what's comforting for those who miss out on being there firsthand today, as you noted earlier, this will become a regular occurrence. Senator Barry Griffin noted last night that we could expect this in another 2 years, if not earlier than that. And so this will become the norm for the Davis administration, and perhaps for whomever wins the next general election.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing for our democracy. For some reason, it just stopped, and we went on like on a 5-year period. And but that's not considered best practice. Best practice is to regularly prorogue, step back, redirect, and refocus your energies with new priorities and new procedures. Yeah.
Dr. Major, you're not the only speaker who's been pushing for an independence of Parliament. The government has made some steps towards that with the Parliamentary Service Bill. How long would you say the push has been there in terms of, you just noted, well, the separation of powers, and speak to us in terms of the importance of that for our democracy, in terms of deepening, strengthening our democracy?
Yeah, I think it is important. Over the last, my predecessors all made some strides.
Exactly.
Obviously, within the last few terms, we pushed a little bit harder, and it became a little bit easier. You know, time has a way of the governance and the cabinet to see a little bit more the wisdom of a true separation. And we've had a parliamentary bill that was passed,
right?
And that's now passed. That's going through its stages to be enacted, and that speaks to. It gives a true measure of the independence. In fact, all of the living speakers signed that as a letter of commendation to
right.
the...
Rome Italia Johnson.
Absolutely. And
yourself.
myself, D. Halson Moultrie, and Smith. We all signed that as a testament to our agreement that we are heading in the right direction. So hats off to the government for that. And what that does is it allows the Speaker to control, to some degree, their own budget, their own staff, and to not feel a sense of coming to the cabinet cap in hand, asking for funds after you've made a ruling and the cabinet is not too happy about. So it puts the Speaker in a very disadvantaged position and precarious position, and so it allows some degree of separation that's important for the dignity of the office. So now the Speaker's office can become more independent. Now, we're not fully there yet. A true independence would be a Speaker resigning their seat, not their seat, but resigning from a party position, which is what we see in some of the other jurisdictions. That's a big step for our democracy and our small democracy. But ultimately, for the Speaker's role to be considered and for the Bahamian people to feel confident, the Speaker will need to separate themselves from the governing party.
We're taking just incremental steps, but we're getting there. How long? It's taken a very long time to get where we are now. We noted Rome Italia Johnson, who was Speaker many years back.
Absolutely.
What's the timeline in your head, not what you hope, in terms of realistically you think we'll get to the point where we have an independent Speaker? Having resigned the seat, not being an MP of any particular constituency, I am just that, the Speaker of the House. That
can probably be within the next 2 elections. It was 1642 when this crisis in the British Parliament occurred, where the Speaker defied the wishes of the King, the Speaker Lenthal, and from that experience, that's 1642. That's a long time ago. Right. And every election, every decade, there were leaps and bounds of change. And so things take time. Our democracy has really improved over the many years. It was not until '64 when we had cabinet government and constituencies and five-year voting terms. In the early years, there were 15 years where they would be in office without an election, without a prorogation or dissolution. 15 years.
Forgetting the fact about people who could actually vote in two different constituencies, or as many as they wanted.
Or vote as many as they wanted. So all of that happened and was solidified in the 1964 Constitution. So we are heading in the right direction. Yeah. Not as fast as we all want, but we're getting there. We live in a great country.
We sure do.
We live in a great country.
Now we're at a point where, of course, we're getting closer to the start of the official opening of Parliament. Most of the people who are participating in this morning's event have arrived, and you'll be seeing more of them on your screen in a bit. But according to the detailed program, the schedule is at 10:15, the House of Assembly will convene, and then the House will appoint the 3-member committee, who will be instructed to proceed to Government House and report to Her Excellency the Governor General. And thereafter, the committee members will report back to the House of Assembly. You spoke, Dr. Major, a bit about this at the beginning, but talk a little bit more, in a little bit more depth, if you could, about this 3-committee member and why it is the way it is.
So when the House assumes the position, the Speaker then will speak to what are we here to do, and then the first duty she has will be to appoint these 3 members, 2 from the government, 1 from the opposition. Their duty is to go to the Government House, request the presence of the Sovereign or the Governor General, and ask permission for the Governor General to attend, and to let us know when the Governor General is ready for us to attend the opening of Parliament, the speech. The Governor General will consent. The members will come back. They will report to the House. And then the proceedings of the House will continue, where the Speaker will then appoint and start to announce sessional committees. These are committees like Public Accounts Committee. Remember now, all of these committees fell away. So we have brand new committees.
So starting over, yeah.
Starting over. Public Accounts Committee, Broadcast Committee, Library Committee, and a few other committees they will be announced, and essentially just waiting for the nod that the black rod is ready to invite or to command the House members to come to the Senate to hear the speech from the throne. And so they will just be waiting, doing the business, basic business, preliminary business, until that rap on the door. The doors will be closed to the House. The black rod will knock on the door 3 times. And they will go through this reenactment. They may not do it today, but they do it during the opening of Parliament, where they knock on the door and the door is slammed in the black rod's face. And then he knocks again 3 more times, the door is open. And that's an indication that we are separate, but we've gotten the invitation. We are coming now to hear the king or the queen or the king's representative, the Governor General's speech from the throne.
You speak of 3 committee member, 3 knocks on the door. What's the significance of the number 3, if I may ask?
I'm not sure why it's 3, but it's related to respect, and we are not. This is comity now. We are working in unison for the governance of the country, but we have no obligation to come. And so the closing of the door means that the sovereign, you'll never find the Governor General in the House of Assembly. That's the sovereign cannot mix with the House. The House will just go to the sovereign and stand at the bar. All of that came from thousands of years ago to separate the kings meddling into the business of the House members.
Well, speaking about the number 3, there are 3 branches of government:
That's
the
what I thought,
legislative,
yeah.
the executive, and the judiciary. And we just saw moments ago, actually, if you take a look now on your screen, you'll see members of the judiciary filing in and taking their positions within Parliament Square. Now, we notice that there are sets in red and in green today.
I think the green are related to the.
Is it the?
It's not judges. They are
no, they're
magistrates.
Magistrates. No, they're all female. Like it'll come to me, but again, not only are the 3 branches of the Parliament is there, the Governor General, the Senate, and the House, but also the 3 branches of government.
Yes.
The executive, the judiciary,
and the legislature.
Yes. And so, again, this speaks to our democracy, the unity of the democracy, but yet the separation. So it's a wonderful exercise.
You speak of not only, following a prorogation, not only is the legislative agenda reset, but those committees, as you noted, they fall away as well and have to be reconstituted. Is it your experience that those same people will be on those committees? I know, for instance, the opposition is keen on starting the work or restarting the work of the Public Accounts Committee. What has been your experience?
It's no guarantee. What is assured is that the committees will be appointed. Who the members are, for example, we have a new government business leader,
yes.
So that changed.
Yes.
So if the Honorable Wayne Monroe was on a committee, he will probably be removed from that committee. So I expect some change. The leader of the opposition has an opportunity to step back and say, you know, I want someone else to serve on the Public Accounts Committee. So I expect some change. I expect some focus in some areas. The most important committee of the sessional committees is the Public Accounts Committee. We agree to that, but I expect some change.
Well, if I remember Kushla talking about the last legislative agenda, I believe they said that there were 100 bills passed.
More than 100 bills passed.
And less than 10 that did not make it through. Or
Correct.
About 10?
Correct.
I mean, that's really quite phenomenal. I didn't realize that there was that much productivity, if you will, over the past 2 years.
Legislation is judged on bills. And the people judge bills as to how these bills affect my personal and my private life.
Exactly.
And so if 100 bills is a lot, and so it shows that the government has been working. And the key to this speech from the throne is the policies and the new legislations and the amendments, are they going to affect my pocketbook and are they going to affect the quality of my life? Eh?
Well, the reality is, too, that we're about 3 years away from a general election.
Isn't that something?
So you got to make sure that the people are feeling it.
Yes.
The government has said, though, despite the fact that we don't know every detail of the speech from the throne, the government has set an equally aggressive agenda moving ahead, an agenda that includes the marijuana bill and some pretty contentious bills. The marijuana bill, it may also include the parole bill. And so there is a lot to get through, despite the fact that it's 3 years. When you set an aggressive agenda, you know, you put it out there that this will be done.
Yes, and that's exactly what the Bahamian people expect, for the government to set the plan, set the tone, determine where we're going, and allow us to hold you accountable to get there, us being the Bahamian people, and of course the opposition. So I think it's a wonderful thing that the government lets you know what the plan is. Many Bahamians don't know what the plan is, and now they would have an idea, this is going to be the focus, and so they know what questions to ask.
And it's also interesting, I think, in this time when you have a lot of young entrepreneurs who are expanding into areas that really we haven't been into before. Crowdfunding is one of them. That's one of the issues that's outstanding right now and in the country. And it brings the question, because people often wonder whether really the economy should be run by government rules, or should the private sector really be influencing government more? What are your thoughts of this now that you're outside of Parliament?
In a small country, the government has to be a player in regulating,
of course,
and in managing, and in protecting big brother from eating small brother.
True.
But ought not be meddling to the extent that it gets in the way of entrepreneurship and progress. So I'm more of a private sector focus with a strong government regulation. Government should set the tone and the environment and let the private sector and the ingenuity of the Bahamian people flourish.
Well, we see here on the screen former Prime Minister Perry Christie, the Right Honourable Perry Christie, just took his seat, and this after having exchanging a word or two with the Chief Justice Ian Winder. And those are some of the new sprinkles that is in the prorogation of Parliament. The opening of Parliament. You have a new Chief Justice this time around. You also have a new Commissioner of Police or Provost Marshal. You have a new Governor General.
Yes.
You know, and as Julian noted earlier, you now have a female holding down the House, the Senate, and the country.
I would imagine that the new Governor General, most honorable, soon to be Dame, I'm sure this is probably an exciting and somewhat anxious moment for her. I remember talking to Dame Marguerite about it before. It's not easy reading the speech from the throne. They carry tremendous weight of the office. And we know they can read well, but in the moment, I'm sure there's some practicing and some preparation.
Right, as occurred last night.
As occurred, yes. And they want to get it right. And so this is her first time. I'm sure she's excited about it. And we all look forward to seeing the new Governor General in all her essence do her thing.
I think the one advantage she has, and it's not because this is her first speech for Parliament, but she's had experience in the office in some way as deputy to the Governor General.
Yes.
So it's not foreign to her. But we look forward to it.
Public life, you know, isn't foreign to her, despite the fact that this is top tier.
Yes.
So this will, like you said, come with an added layer of responsibility, but she's always had to shoulder responsibilities. At one point, she was acting Prime Minister. You know, Deputy Prime Minister, a cabinet minister.
Absolutely.
And that's from very humble beginnings. You know, so the Governor General, no doubt, I think we all agree, is certainly up to the task, the new task she's been given.
There are some changes that come when you become Governor General, for example, although I'm sure she will remain accessible. It's how you have access to the Governor General that changes.
No doubt about it.
You know, you just can't walk up there and say, come to see the Governor General. It doesn't work like that.
And right now, I was speaking of the Governor General, the Governor General, the Well, this actually is file footage of the Governor General.
Swearing in.
The swearing in of the Governor General. On the side of her, you see the Chief Justice Ian Winder. Just behind her, the Commissioner of Police, or Provost Marshal Clayton Fernanda, and she was taking the oath, her swearing in. And this just happened on September 1st.
Yes.
And this will be her first speech from the throne, and the way things are looking, certainly not her last.
Yeah, I had the privilege to be at that ceremony. That was really a wonderful time. The exuberance in the air, the excitement. I remember an FNM senator, we were walking out, hugged me, and he said, you know, I feel really good about this. I think she will go down in history as one of our best.
And that speaks volumes.
And that speaks volume.
Well, I think what's great about it is to show that still in the Bahamas, doesn't matter where you start out from or from whence you came, it's that you can still rise to the top. There's still opportunities.
And it shows a level of maturity on the part of the opposition, that she's not from us, but I know her worth.
Exactly.
You know?
You had said, I don't know if you had said, Julian, about she had served as Deputy Governor General
and acting Prime. Excuse me. Yeah.
What I thought about was when I had the privilege to serve as Speaker, the government leader at the time was the late Dr. B.J. Nottage. You know who the deputy was? O.B. Wilshcombe. He was prepared. He was preparing for it. And as I mentioned before, that was almost unstated. Nobody knew he was deputy. But any time Dr. Nottage was not present, which was often because he was Minister of National Security.
Absolutely.
He traveled. Minister O.B. Wilshcombe served, and he was just a delight to work with.
Is it a natural progression that, having served as deputy to the Governor General, that person automatically becomes the Governor General? Because it seems to play out as such, but is it a natural progression?
I don't know if it's automatic, but
it's good preparation.
Yes,
it's good preparation.
Yes. And on our screens now, here comes the Prime Minister, I believe, with Mrs. Davis.
You have the Prime.
Of course, as usual, she's resplendent in green. And today,
emerald green, you have the aides, the Prime Minister's aides, and you know, lovingly, the Davises are holding hands, walking into the opening of Parliament. So that's a good money shot for photographers and videographers. You also have Denzel Roll there, we see, greeting some of the guests. And he's a noted clergyman, well known in the country. We go back to Parliament Street, and that would be the House members entering the House of Assembly. That looks from the back on like the Deputy Prime Minister, the Honourable Chester Cooper. We also see the Minister of Education, Glenys Hannah Martin, as well as the Minister you also see Minister Clay Sweeting as well entering the House of Assembly. So they're filing in, and we've been told that this morning's proceedings, so the opening of Parliament, will be on time. In fact, I'm told that the Davis administration has quite a good record of starting Parliament on time, and that, you know, probably only 3 times that they were late. We now take you into the House of Assembly. That's wife of the Deputy Prime Minister, Cecilia Cooper. Foreign Affairs Minister Fred Mitchell, who's beaming at this moment. Glenys Hannah Martin, as we said earlier, and just behind her, about to step into the precincts of the House, we have the Minister Alfred Stairs.
As you can see, the Deputy Prime Minister looks quite...
Labor and Immigration. And that's another thing. This prorogation follows a cabinet shuffle.
Yes, that's also an interesting twist to this. And so there's much various
some changes prior to the opening of Parliament, I know.
So there's a lot of talking points here.
I guess we can also expect a new chaplain, of course.
That's also, again, the purview of the Speaker. Speaker will choose, the Speaker can choose to bring the same chaplain back, or announce a new one, and each of them will take their seats. There's Honourable.
And the Minister of Health, Michael Darville, a very trying time for Minister Bell, walks into this opening of Parliament quite differently than he did.
Yes, the last time.
2 years ago, having lost his wife only, I think it would have been almost two weeks ago.
One of the bills that fell off during this prorogation was the National Health Insurance Bill, and I only mention that because I have the privilege of serving as chairman, and I've gotten assurance from the Prime Minister and the Minister of Health
that it will make a return.
That will be a return, as is, and so that's an example of bills that could just come back. Some will fall away,
and that's something that has been in the making for a long time. From the Christie administration.
Absolutely.
You know, NHI is working to some extent right now for, you know, but it's a catastrophic.
It's a catastrophic
issue
that's the big
that people really need help on. But the funding mechanism has always been a big deal.
Exactly.
We also see now the new Minister of Agriculture, Jomo Campbell, who has now been bumped up to a substantive cabinet post, as well as Minister of Labour, Pierre Glover-Roll, having served as State Minister for Public Services.
Now a substantive Minister of Public Services.
Now a substantive minister, and the Prime Minister minced no words in calling both bright stars.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's quite a commendation, having just entered frontline politics.
Minister Glover-Roll having a few little hiccups at some point during her tenure as State Minister, has really redefined and carved out her niche now.
Yes.
She's definitely one of the brighter stars of the new generation.
So what we see now, the Senate is assembling, the House is assembling, and both simultaneously will begin and conduct its business.
Right.
And the Senate will move first to welcome the House members into Parliament Square.
The Senate particularly comprised of younger arm of Parliament. In this case, we see a lot of first-timers to frontline politics. We have seniors like Michael Halkitis, who also doubles as the Minister of Economic Affairs, the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, Ryan Pinder, there. But then we have newcomers like Quinton Lightbourne and Darren Pickstock, Barry Griffin, who I must say held down his own last night during our pre-show, the agenda. And he serves as
Deputy
Vice President.
You know what I find that so interesting about the composition of the Senate? Because we know years ago, it was more senior people who have had success in community, coming and taking those roles there. But now it seems like it's a training ground for future politicians.
How do you feel about that, Dr. Major, the Senate being a training ground when really the Senate is the upper chamber? And how do we get away from nixing the image of the Senate as just a rubber stamp?
I know. I am so happy for these young leaders in the Senate and what they've accomplished and what they will accomplish in the future. But I tend to always err on the side of the original intent. The intention is for the senators, the youngest age, I think, should be 30, is to be older, more senior persons who have had some experience in the community, who could speak to bills that may need to be tinkered with or adjusted to make it better, as opposed to a rubber stamp. It looks like it has been more of a rubber stamp of the last years. So I'm inclined to believe that the senators we ought to return to our original intent, to have more senior persons serve, as opposed to someone who's a budding politician.
You speak of more senior people in the Senate. What do you say about the depth of contributions during debates, and that be it coming out of the Senate, which comprises, like we admit, of more younger people, and the House as well? Interestingly,
I see a brilliance coming out of the Senate, and many of those, for example, Senator Barry Griffin and Pickstock, these of, and of course, Michael Halkitis and others, are very, very bright, interesting improvements to bills. So I've been pleasantly surprised of what we've seen. I think the debate has been a standard, but generally I must admit that the debate across the board in the House has always to some degree been a bit less and lackluster, and so I'm a little concerned about that. I think we will miss Obi Wilshire very much.
Oh yes.
And there are those who bring a level of research, a level of understanding, and not one who would read word for word, but speak to the heart and mind of what the bill is attempting to achieve. And so that's why the Speaker's work is so difficult, because she always battles with this thing called the process of relevance, where members should be speaking to a bill, but they go off and speak to something else completely because they want to get something, a new idea, to slip it in. And so that's a constant battle, but it's a work in progress. It's a tough place because it is a debating chamber. It is the art of war to some degree, but the role is to keep the level of decorum. That's why we call them honorable. We do so not because they are, but we do so because that's what they should be.
And that's it. I had a discussion with some colleagues who are more senior than I, and we were talking about that back in the days of Paul Adderley and others, and L.W. Young. You would actually have some serious bombs thrown at you, but it would be said in such an articulate way.
Exactly.
That but nowadays it seems to be less artful,
less artful,
and less sophisticated.
Right. Less sophisticated, exactly.
Do you think this then requires training on the part, training training, let's just leave it as training?
Yes, and this may surprise you. When I was elected in 2012, one of my greatest shocks was that I was selected to be Speaker. Because on the face of it, I was not qualified. I say that without fear of contradiction. Why? Why? Because I was a novice politician, a first-time member. But in our system, based on what you choose from those among you, and you determine what is the best, I was chosen. I was elected unanimously by my peers, and so I had to get my act together and prepare and become
what they need you to be.
What they needed me to be. That's a bit unfair, and I see that plays out throughout our system. We are still a young democracy. Many members are novices, and they're giving a level of responsibility that they may not be ready to assume. And so there's some work to be done there. But it all starts with how the parties select candidates, who these candidates are, and how they are selected to be served.
Now, obviously, your having been Speaker must give you a completely different and added layer of perspective about our country.
No doubt.
As a private citizen, how do you approach things now, having had that experience?
Well, in terms of how I see politics and governance?
And everything in day-to-day dealing with people in society. And looking at issues that affect Bahamians.
I feel I have a great level of concern and responsibility for the leaders of today. It is a very difficult task to govern. The expectations of our constituents, how we have created a level of expectations, and how we have rather focused on legislation that affects their quality of life, how we have instead focused on how we could help one person get a job. That has caused great consternation in governance, because it becomes at the end of the day, what have you done for me? As opposed to, were you a good legislator, or did you do what you were elected to do? And so training is key. You asked the question. Training is key. Continuing education is key. When I became Speaker, we started a training exercise. The first thing we did, we had training for all of the new members of Parliament, for myself. I flew all over the world, went to London, went to Australia, went to South Africa, Sri Lanka, not Australia, I meant Sri Lanka. And we need to be exposed to parliamentary governance and parliamentary democracy, and most of our members.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question, of course, as we're seeing the Royal Bahamas Defence Force and the Royal Bahamas Police Force on guard there. But when you are going through your travels as Speaker, did you find that there were more things in common that were challenges amongst different nations, or big differences?
That's a great question. More things that were in common. Yeah. One of the things I've learned over life is we wake up sometimes thinking we're alone. Everybody got the same issues. And you travel and you see a lot of the same challenges in other parliaments. Everybody's fighting for independence, they're fighting for democracy, they're fighting for more funding. They want to find ways to help their constituents and grow the country. Governance is difficult. And until we focus our attention in governance on being accountable, broadening and deepening the democracy, our people will forever be frustrated. And so our focus has to always be on how can we deepen the democracy so our people could feel that it is about them. It always has to be about serving the people and how they perceive us as leaders. Too long there's been a disconnect. What we are seeing today in the opening of Parliament is a meshing where people feel connected to what is happening. They see governance and action. But there's tomorrow, and tomorrow has to make sense to the Bahamian people.
You speak of governance being difficult. I think a question for me is, do you miss it then, or should I presume that you don't?
I do miss it. I do miss it. It has a tremendous levels of responsibility and an honor to be placed in a position. There's a weight of an office that carries with a member of Parliament the expectations of individuals and how it affects them. I don't miss that. And the helplessness of a member of Parliament. A member of Parliament is at the highest echelon in our society. So few people throughout the world get an opportunity to be a member of Parliament. Then you get there and you recognize that it's not about you, and you still feel a sense of helplessness because problems still exist.
Well, we go now to proceedings in the Senate, where we have President of the Senate speaking at this moment.
Along with other clerks, Asheran Lightburn, Rashad Flowers, and other staff members of the Parliament. Your collective diligence, work ethic, and efficiency under conditions that are not always optimal is admirable and valued. It is with profound sadness that the Chair extends condolences to the children, siblings, and wider family of our fallen colleague and former Senator, the Honorable Obadiah Hercules Wilchcomb, Minister of Social Services, Information and Broadcasting, Leader of Government Business in the House of Assembly, and Member of Parliament for West End, Grand Bahama, and Bimini. The nation has lost a highly favored son who left behind a brand of politics and convictions that connected and interwove the Quiet Revolution, majority rule, the Sir Lyndon Pinland political era, and this present era. Minister Wilchcomb consistently believed in Bahamianization and Bahamians, especially if you were from West End and Bimini. He firmly believed that our tenacious and unique past should undergird each generation towards one love, a progressive future with economic empowerment, business opportunities, social upliftment, alongside a stable and well-protected democracy. He pulled himself up by his bootstraps, led by example, and became a living testament to the great heights a man can attain if one perseveres, remains committed to excellence. Armed with an insatiable appetite for the advancement of the Bahamian people, Minister Wilchcomb made significant contributions to the development of a post-independent Bahamas. The tapestry of his legacy will show that he became a successful journalist, broadcaster, senator, member of parliament, government minister, statesman, historian, sportsman, debater, orator, businessman, and political strategist. I'm thankful for the times he came into the Senate chamber to observe or watch the proceedings on television and offered constructive observations. Minister Wilscombe led by example and demonstrated Longfellow's creed. The heights of great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in the night. Indeed, his legacy will be marked as a humble man with a winning smile who worked hard in silence and allowed success to be his noise. Condolences and prayers are also extended to Minister Keith Bell and his family on the passing of his beloved and angelic wife, Attorney Clara Taylor Bell. Ms. Bell was a beautiful, warm, and encouraging gem who was intentional about being kind and bearing the gifts of the Spirit. Undoubtedly, both Minister Wilscombe and Attorney Clara Bell will be missed. May they rest in peace and rise in glory. Senators, we have assembled today in our nation's upper chamber as guardians and caretakers of the people of the Bahamian people's business. During the past session, this chamber demonstrated tremendous fortitude, debating and passing into law over 100 bills. A significant amount has been accomplished with the limited resources of the Attorney General's office. This is a remarkable feat and a testament to the exemplary leadership and teamwork at the AG's office. The chair is appreciative that on the outside of these four walls, the Senate body comes together in a bipartisan manner, donating time and resources to engage in community outreach programs. Furthermore, I am well aware of your individual participation and involvement in civic organizations, religious groups, fraternities, and sororities, in addition to your random acts of kindness and generosity, which may often go unnoticed or unpublished, but you continue to assist one person at a time, because this is simply the Bahamian way and the right thing to do. It is the chair's view that Senator Maxine's devotion to children and Senator Hepburn Forbes' love for young people and Senator Ronald Duncombe's all-boys mentoring program, Next Gen, which is designed for young men from single-parent homes, has motivated all of us to look a little deeper to find ways to empower and bring hope to our youth. As a community and society, it is imperative that we find ways to help and not hinder, complement and not complain, attract and not attack our young and vulnerable persons. Towards this end, in October 2022, in conjunction with the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture, we saw the rebirth of Youth Senate. To ensure the success of Youth Senate, the chair, Senators Griffin, Barnett Ellis, Lightburn, and the chief clerk actually trained and guided youth senators on Senate procedures. The youth senators were most grateful for the senators' time and attentiveness and the practical educational opportunity. The chair is looking forward to Youth Senate Debaters 2023, where participants will debate a resolution in these chambers later this month. The Senate has also been seeing an uptick in visitors to our gallery, comprising of foreign delegations, schools, NGOs, church groups, civic organizations, professionals, government officials, and retirees. On the invite of the Senate President, fathers of the senators visited the gallery and observed the proceedings. We then shared a meal together. The chair encourages visitors to come and experience in real time your senators at work, debating laws in your best interests. We would endeavor to accommodate all who wish to observe the proceedings. Fellow senators, an objective review of the last 2 years revealed that your individual and combined commitments to and engagement in public service has been consistent, robust, and forthright. You have demonstrated through tenacity, a strong work ethic, and determination that your commitment to this nation and the well-being of its citizens is paramount. As we commence a new parliamentary session, this august body will bring to the debates your individual voices, perspectives, diverse opinions, and your passion and love for bettering the lives of Bahamian people. It is appreciated that your continued quest for Bahamian idealism is a function of your debates becoming more robust and adversarial. Please be reminded that this can be accomplished with respect and dignity whilst being steadfastly committed to democratic principles, fairness, equality, human rights, justice, honor, and integrity. In this vein, you must be committed to strict adherence to the rules of procedure of the Senate. In particular, it is of utmost importance that the content of your contribution is relevant to the bill or resolution at hand. You must strive to be the protectors of the highest standard that this chamber demands. Discipline in preparation and execution extols political maturity and inspires confidence, trust, and respect in the upper chamber. Our standard should never diminish, but remain a leading and luminous light in our parliamentary democracy. I once again underscore the importance of remaining relevant in your debate. Momentarily, we will gather in the Parliament Square to hear the speech from the throne of the Bahamas' 12th Governor General, Her Excellency Cynthia Pratt. This year of Jubilee presents enhanced step towards equality and gender parity in the Bahamian Parliament. For the very first time in the history of our governance, we will all bear witness to a woman Governor General reading the speech from the throne, which will be received by 2 women presiding officers. And in the presence of 5 women cabinet ministers. Undoubtedly, these appointments are critical steps towards attaining the principles essential to democracy. In the words of Michelle Obama, no country can flourish if it stifles the potential of its women and deprives itself of the contribution of half of its citizens. The chair extends sincere gratitude to the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, the Honorable Philip Brave Davis, for his visionary and courageous leadership in recognizing the significant contribution of women to this country and mirroring this in government appointments. It is my hope that our shared courage and tenacity will provide a catalyst for change, for more women representation in frontline politics. It is also my desire that we provide unshakable hope to a generation of young girls and boys to be driven with purpose, determined to stay the course, to pursue their educational, the education and dreams of a better tomorrow. In so doing, anything is possible. We reside in perilous times when citizens around the world are losing faith in parliamentarians. Notwithstanding, as parliamentarians, we have an individual and collective obligation to rebuild, realign, and restore public confidence in our democratic and political system. This can be accomplished by our conduct, deportment, and performance within and outside of these hallowed chambers. We have a singular and collective responsibility to demonstrate the physical, mental, and moral courage to press on and protect democracy and the rights and freedoms of all. As we begin this new parliamentary session, it is my solemn prayer that despite our Gethsemane moments, dark hours, or times of despair, that we do what we as parliamentarians must do, keep going. It is my hope and prayer that we keep going and moving towards making our jurisdiction to be the best in the Western Hemisphere. May God continue to bless each of you, and may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I thank you, and I hereby table the President's communication. Senator Michael Halkitis. It's a resolution. So what we do now?
Okay, we were just finishing up with the Senate, having heard a communication from President of the Senate, Lachelle Adderley, who gave a firm charge to senators as the opening of Parliament is about to begin or has begun. We now turn it over to the House of Assemblies, where proceedings are happening actually simultaneously. And here we have House Speaker Patricia DeVoe.
For our late start this morning, as we are without air conditioning, so bear with us this morning. I sit before you today as the Speaker of the House of Parliament to extend a warm and heartfelt welcome to each and every one of you as we convene for the opening of this new parliamentary session. Today, it is with a feeling of profound sadness and deep emotions that we convene this parliamentary session with heavy hearts as a result of the death of our dear colleague, friend, and esteemed leader of government business in this House, the Honorable Obadiah Hercules Wilchcombe, Member of Parliament for West End, Grand Bahama, and Bimini. Permit me to say a few words about the Honorable Member. With your leave, I would like to refer to him as Minister Wilchcombe as I move forward. Minister Wilchcombe was not only a valued member of the Progressive Liberal Party, but also a cherished friend. His passing leaves a void that cannot be filled. Minister Wilchcombe was known for his impressive leadership and transformative work towards journalism in the Bahamas. He dedicated his life to public service and helped to revolutionize broadcasting in the Bahamas. Minister Wilchcombe was a statesman and a Bahamian ambassador at heart. His passion for advancing a modern Bahamas was well known during his many years as Minister of Tourism, where he championed the Bahamas internationally. As Minister of Social Services and Urban Development, he had a keen interest for the disabled and a desire to improve conditions in urban communities. His tenacity towards government business in this honorable chambers will surely be missed. Today, as I ascended this speaker's chair, it was one of the toughest walks I've ever had thus far in this parliament. No longer can I look to my immediate right and see the familiar face that always gave me his signature smiles, the presence of his calm spirit, and of course, that assuring nod that signals to me that everything was going to be okay. His legacy will live in history, remaining a symbolic icon for liberation and progression. As we mourn his loss, let us also celebrate the incredible person he was and the legacy he leaves behind. I take this opportunity to offer our collective sympathy and condolences to the Welchcombe family, the constituency of West Grand Bahama and Bimini, members of this esteemed Parliament, those that love him, and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas during this difficult time. I would also like, on behalf of this House of Parliament, to extend our sincerest condolences to our brother, our colleague, and friend, the Honourable Member for Carmichael, on the loss of his wife. To you, my brother, we are with you. We have our full support, and we wish you and your family well as you go through this time of bereavement. Honorable members, it is with great honor and enthusiasm that I address you representing the diverse voices and aspirations of our beloved Bahamas. We have convened under the proclamation from the Governor General summoning the Parliament to meet on the 4th day of October 2023. Momentarily, Her Excellency will open the Parliament with a speech from the throne, which will contain the legislative agenda of the government. During the last parliamentary session, the government pursued a very active and vigorous legislative agenda. Of note was the passage of the Parliamentary Service Act 2023. This was foreshadowed in the speech from the throne that opened the 2021 parliamentary session. The government also gave a clear indication of its intention to debate the Court Services Bill by tabling it and placing it on the agenda in the last session. Unfortunately, this final piece of legislation, which is necessary to strengthen and complete the doctrine of the separation of powers as envisioned by the Constitution, was unable to be completed. With the prorogation of the Parliament, I suspect that the Court Services Bill will again be tabled in this parliamentary session. Honorable members, as we are reminded of the tremendous responsibility and privilege that comes with serving our nation, our democracy, a beacon of hope in the Caribbean, relies on the dedication, integrity, and commitment of those who fill these hallowed halls. The past 2 years has been a testament to our resilience as a nation. Through it all, you, our dedicated parliamentarians, have worked tirelessly to navigate these uncharted waters, striving for the betterment of our people and the progress of our nation. In the spirit of unity and cooperation, let us approach this new session with a renewed sense of purpose. Our citizens look to us for leadership, for policies that improve their lives, and for a vision for a brighter future. It is incumbent upon us to rise above partisan divides and work collaboratively for the common good of our nation. In this age of technical advancement, I encourage you all to embrace the opportunities presented by science and digital innovations. We must harness these tools to make our legislative processes more efficient and transparent, in line with our commitment to progress and excellence. Moreover, let us not forget our duty to uphold the principles of justice and the rule of law. We all can attest firsthand to the power of the law to bring about positive change. Let us remain vigilant in our oversight, ensuring that our laws and policies reflect the needs and values of our citizens, and that justice is accessible to all. Honorable members, in the coming days, weeks, and months, we will deliberate on matters of great importance, from healthcare and education to economic recovery and environmental sustainability. Let us approach these debates with open hearts and open minds, remembering that our decisions have a profound impact on the lives of those we serve. In closing, I want to express my unwavering belief in the potential of our nation and the dedication of our parliamentarians. Together, we can chart a course towards a brighter, more prosperous future for the Bahamas. Let this parliamentary session be a testament to our commitment to progress, unity, and the enduring spirit of our great nation. Thank you, and may your work here be guided by wisdom and compassion for the benefit of all Bahamians. Okay. Where do I start from?
Well, we just finished hearing from the House Speaker, Patricia DeVoe, having given her charge to House members. And in that charge, it began with extending sympathy, much as was the case in the Senate, extending sympathy to the Wilscombe family following the passing of Cabinet Minister and House member, a leader of government business, O.B. Wilscombe. Sympathy also extended to Keith Bell, who we see there on our screen as well. Obviously, and for good reason, everyone is attending, but that charge also spoke to, for the Speaker of the House, that is, upholding principles of the rule of law and justice, and that House members be guided by wisdom and compassion, and pretty much the same sentiments of the President of the Senate, who asked her members to carry out their work with humility and to help, not hinder, attract and not attack. And I think at the end of the day, while Bahamians or the electorate put MPs, put senators on a pedestal, at the end of the day, they want to see them as people who are compassionate and who are out to advance their causes and make things right in the world for them.
I think the thing that is wrong there is that we put them on a pedestal. They should be respected for their role, but not put on a pedestal.
Yeah, I think both Speaker and President followed very noble themes. And the President of the Senate spoke to the women's issues, and she spoke to a charge for the senators, and of course, a tribute to the late Obie Wilshcombe. That's all very, very important. But in particular, the Speaker, when she spoke to the principles of the rule of law, it's always a cry for the leaders of the House and the Senate. They want the members and the senators to conduct themselves with a level of decorum such that the Bahamian people could see them worthy of being called honorable, because they recognize that after today, the sparks will fly.
We see the senators
now leaving,
leaving the upper chamber to proceed in Parliament Square, where the opening of Parliament will actually take place. Well, the speech from the throne will be read by the Governor General, Her Excellency Cynthia Pratt.
So the Senate will be ahead of the House, primarily because the Senate is essentially going home. So the Senate is essentially moving its quarters outside in the Parliament Square.
Right.
So the senators will be in place and they will be home. Then the Governor General will be present in her position, and then you will see the House follow and get to a position to the bar of the Senate and stand while the proceedings and the reading of the speech from the throne takes place. And so now what you're seeing is the procedures.
We just saw the three-member committee leaving the House of Assembly to head to the Governor General, and from there she will invite. They will invite the Governor General to
the accurate word is command. She will command, and the black rod will then come, indicating that the sovereign is now prepared to hear you or to see you. Yeah.
You have now the senators exiting the upper chamber. You have led, of course, by the President of the Senate, the black rod that Dr. Major spoke of. You have Senate Vice President Barry Griffin, Minister of Economic Affairs, who's leader of Senate Business, Minister of Legal Affairs, Attorney General Ryan Pinder. You have Quinton Lightbourne, Leon Lundy, Randy Rowe, Michaela Barnett, Darren Henfield, leader of opposition business in the Senate, Maxine Seymour, and that makes up the Senate right there, and they will proceed into Parliament Square. Now, that would explain the comment you made. That would explain why senators sit and...
That's correct.
House members stand and bow. So that must be taxing for House members to stand throughout what could be a pretty lengthy speech from the throne for this entire process, stand and bow.
In the speech, every paragraph, the Governor General will say, Madam President, honorable senators, and they would bow from their seats. Madam Speaker, members of the House of Assembly, and they would bow from their stance. And each time they do that, it will be a pause for that, and then she will continue. That's literally every paragraph.
Now, the three-member committee that we spoke of, like you said, goes to Government House to command the presence of the Governor General. Walk us through what takes place once they get there again for us at this point.
The committee members?
Yeah, the committee members.
Yeah, they would request an audience with the Governor General.
Correct.
The Governor General indicating that the Parliament is ready to receive you, and the Governor General will then leave her residence and come back to the Senate and assume her seat on the crown, and then beckon for the House members.
Now, we have no idea what we have, like I indicated earlier, we have a little idea of what that speech from the throne will entail, and some of that speaking to some of the bills that will be reintroduced. It didn't quite make it to the 2021 legislative agenda. We spoke earlier about the Parliamentary Service Bill. We see there's long been this push for a new Parliament. When do you see that taking place? What actually do you see that looking like? We've long outgrown the present Parliament, and for more than one reason, the Bahamas needs an updated parliament. I know parliamentarians have long complained about bathroom facilities, not much place for meetings, and that's in the case of the opposition or the government. So these are the challenges that they have to deal with at least once a week.
Our parliament started in 1729. 86 years later, and they met at the home of Samuel Lawford. They moved to the present location 86 years later. We've been in that building for 208 years. That's a long time. So that building is outdated. It served its purpose. It's infested with some friends we'd rather call not. And it's just a difficult place to be. Limited bathrooms, no elevator, yet we have to get persons sometimes with wheelchairs
Right,
upstairs.
it's not disabled friendly.
It violates all of our bills that was passed related to handicap access. And so it's an embarrassing situation, and we need to move that parliament. Minister Fred Mitchell has been on a crusade for many years. He's now leading a committee to suggest.
Now the committee of three.
As we see here, that's the committee of three to meet with the Governor General.
That's Mikhail Bonamy, is it? And,
Mikhail Bonamy, it is.
Ginger Moxie.
Ginger Moxie and Iram Lewis.
And Iram Lewis.
Okay, great.
And there you have the Governor General.
I will now take this opportunity to
Sitting, waiting on the request to be made, I would imagine.
Yes. So they're speaking to her. She's acquiescing. They would bow, and they would take the authority that she's given them now back to the House by way of the back to the Senate to the Black Rod, who will then now beckon the House members.
Any particular reason why certain people are picked to go to the Governor General? Any order of priority, anything they would have done? How are these people, that three-member committee, chosen?
I think primarily by the Prime Minister. I'm not sure it's arbitrary, but no particular qualifications for that. It is an honor to be chosen, yes, but two government members and one opposition. As long as we fulfill that criteria, that would be fine, yeah.
Yes, we were talking about the Black Rod earlier, and I saw his face properly now, and that's Rashad Flowers,
yes,
who has been at the House of Assembly for the past, I don't think he was there when you were there.
He was not there then. He's rising quite rapidly. And he's serving, he is employed by, he's serving the Crown, essentially, because he's the Governor General's representative. And so he's essentially a sergeant-at-arms for the Senate. And he will then beckon to the members that it's time to be received by the Governor General.
Dr. Major, we just had an off-camera little point that we would raise, and I think you should explain this, if you will, to the public, that the Speaker is someone who cannot be fired.
Yeah, that the Speaker is empowered by the Constitution in Article 50, that speaks to what happens after a dissolution or a prorogation of Parliament, and that Speaker stays in position until a new Parliament after a complete dissolution. So the Speaker actually is paid and is responsible until a new Parliament is convened. And other than the Speaker being asked to serve as a minister, or dies in office, or some criminal offense, those are pretty much the only three reasons why a Speaker would be removed from office. And so it becomes very much a challenge for anyone who believes that a vote of no confidence alone could cause a Speaker to demit office. When a vote of no confidence is passed, if it is passed, the only thing that can happen is it serves for the record, but you cannot come back with another vote of no confidence within the sitting of Parliament. Now, this is a new sitting of Parliament. and now a vote of no confidence can come back if that were the case. But in essence, the Speaker's role remains pretty much final. It is more secure than any other position that I can think of in the House of Assembly.
One of the three people as part of that three-man committee, three-person committee really, is Mikhail Bonamy, a backbencher in the House of Assembly. What's the importance of backbenchers? Well, what's the importance of
that? That is a great question.
I would think that
the role is an important one.
Yeah, it does, absolutely. Right. It's a great question. Think of the British Parliament for a second. It's about 400 members. The cabinet is of 20-some persons. There's a large segment of backbenchers. Backbenchers help to hold the government accountable.
Absolutely.
And the backbenchers help to select a speaker that they want who will serve them. The backbenchers have a lot of importance and authority. It was backbenchers that got rid of Speaker McCarthy in the United States Senate yesterday. Yes. That's a different conversation for a different time. But backbenchers are critical. They help to hold the government accountable. Unfortunately, in our system of government, how we have functioned, our cabinets have been, quote unquote, gussie-made. They've been a bit large, and many governments have served in that capacity for many years. And so with a small backbench, it becomes more difficult to hold the government accountable because everybody's is a part of the same team, on the same payroll, heading in the same directions, and have the same level of quid pro quo.
Okay, we turn now our attention to the House proceedings. We're picking up from there.
Yep.
We didn't hear the government.
Okay, for your edification, I will repeat it. I called 5. The Public Accounts Committee consists of the Honourable Member for Marco City, the Honourable Member for East Grand Bahama, the Honourable Member for Central Grand Bahama, the Honourable Member for Bain and Grantstown, and the Honourable Member for South Beach.
Yes. Thank you very much, Madam President. Both members from the government side are members, an extension of the executive. It is our understanding that the rules do not permit those persons to sit on the Public Accounts Committee, and it should be backbenchers.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The government side has indicated, and along with myself, that we will take it under advisory. Okay? And the next session, we'll come back and name those persons.
You will address it in the next.
We will address it.
Thank you.
Order that the following members be a committee for the Broadcasting Committee. The Honourable Member for Golden Isles, the Honourable Member for Pinewood, the Honourable Member for Pine Ridge, the Honourable Member for Marco City, the Honourable Member for St. Barnabas. Ordered that the following members be a committee for the House Rules and Business Committee. The Honourable Member for Freetown, the Honourable Member for Fort Charlotte, the Honourable Member for Nassau Village, the Honourable Member for East Grand Bahama, the Honourable Member for St. Anne's. Ordered that the following members be a committee for the Public Treasury Committee. The Honourable Member for Golden Gates, the Honourable Member for Centerville, the Honourable Member for South and Central Andros, the Honourable Member for Marco City, the Honourable Member for East Grand Bahama. Ordered that the following members be a committee for the House Management and Budget Committee. The Honourable Member for Bamboo Town, the Honourable Member for Fox Hill, the Honourable Member for Freetown, the Honourable Member for Pinewood, the Honourable Member for Seabreeze, the Honourable Member for East Grand Bahama, the Honourable Member for Long Island, and the Honourable Member for St. Barnabas. That is it.
Members going into Government House to see.
I never saw that, no.
We're now back on Parliament Street. The Governor General has arrived from Government House after being commanded. After
being requested?
Being requested, I'm sorry, being requested by the three-person committee. Yes. And there she is, shaking the hand and having a light chat with Chief Justice Ian Winder alongside him. Commissioner of Police, the Honor Guard.
Yeah, so she's gonna...
That's Clayton Fernanda and
Dr. King.
Dr. Raymond King. And she will now...
Inspect the guard. Yeah?
Inspect the guard.
Yeah.
That will first, she will first have the royal salute and then the inspection. The thing about this is Cynthia Pratt is doing so as Governor General alone and without the support of her husband. So it speaks to the strength of this woman having been elevated and the fact that her husband is not there to bear witness.
Yeah,
and he was by her side every step of the way, every time she stood up in Parliament, whether she made a contribution or not. And now she must walk this road alone.
Yes, she does. And she epitomizes the strength of the Bahamian woman and the spirit of womanhood in our country. And she has been tested and tried, and she is led by her faith in God as an ordained minister and a very, very humble servant. And so she's taken this on in stride as God's will for her at such a time as this.
She once said to me, she said, one thing about women, you know, we're like tea bags. Once you put us in hot water, we only get stronger. And I think she's a testament to the analogy she made. Walk us through, Dr. Major, in terms of what is about to take place and the significance, because I think we saw this during Independence and during formal ceremonies of this kind.
And there was when she was sworn in, there was a very smaller version of it. She actually did inspect.
Right, you are correct.
The state opening of Parliament is the largest single function for other than a state funeral, which we will experience shortly.
Yeah.
And so, and of course, during Independence, we would have the tattoo and all these and the other functions. But other than this, you would see, and this is a part of our British tradition, the inspection of the Honor Guard, because you have again the unity of the Royal Bahamas Defence Force, notice the term Royal, and the Royal Bahamas Police Force, Royal, all a part from our British tradition, all coming together as one, and showing our finer soldiers in their wonderful garbs and in their dress. And so this is this is the tradition of our British heritage.
To show off the best we have to offer in terms of the closest we come to a military.
Exactly.
Going back to the House for a minute, the House Speaker named the committees, the Business Committee, the Broadcasting Committee, the Budget Committee, but chief among them, the Public Accounts Committee. Why is that so important? I know it comprises of much more opposition members than that of government members.
Excellency. One of the things that makes Parliament function so fluidly is the level of checks and balance. And under the Westminster system, the Public Accounts Committee represent one of the checks.
Excellency, the guard stands at the open order and awaits your inspection. Excellency, may I have your permission to stand fast to number 1 platoon, the remainder to stand at east. Stand fast, number 1 platoon, remainder, stand at east. Yes, stay up, yes, well. How are you this morning? Yeah, stay
Yeah, there's a chant. That's the COI?
That's probably,
So there are a lot of people still outside.
So much for the police saying there ain't gonna be no disruption.
Well,
that's all of them there.
That's not disruption.
No, it isn't really.
That's democracy.
That's democracy, huh?
No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Disruption is if they bum rush the tent.
Yeah. She got some comfortable walking shoes on there.
Yeah. I think that.
She would stop and speak to a young soldier and have a chat.
In a lighthearted moment.
I'm giving them some inspiration, I'm sure.
And whomever
Are they usually the younger of the forces?
Yes, they're usually the frontline soldiers. And whomever she stops to takes that experience for the rest of their lives.
There are also rangers participating in this. I saw some of them today, and rare opportunity for them.
She has a very beautiful smile, though.
Yes. She looks
so
wonderful.
The smile alone makes you feel. She needs to work on it. So she walked from, what is that? She walked
from Parliament Street.
Walked from Parliament Street down then, and then up.
And then back up here towards the tent.
So once she reaches the tent,
she'll come inside. It's interesting that those inside now only can see this by monitor.
Right.
So those are outside. So it's always room for the public to get involved. So this is quite good.
And is it a must that you go down both lines, or you? Okay.
Not at all.
It's up to her as much as she wants to. Yeah. This is the first time, like for the big one, you know.
With drones. This is so fascinating.
No, it really has made everything.
Amazing.
This is Ashley.
I guess so. I don't know.
Ashley or Neville?
didn't get. What did they protest? Protest of?
I was never told.
What is the angle?
But I just... Well, there you have on your screen the Governor General with the royal salute and inspection of the guard. And as we were saying off air, gentlemen, the Governor General, she feels she made a point of wearing low shoes today, and she went down both lines. And I understand that you don't necessarily have to, but you know, like you noted, Julian, this is her first opening of Parliament.
And proud personal moment for her.
Yes, it is. Yes,
I'm sure.
And she took the time to speak to quite a number of those officers. And like you said, Dr. Major, and that's an experience that will last a lifetime for them. And it certainly must be an experience for the visitors, who you can see some right now just behind the Diaz, witnessing a Governor General royal salute and inspection. How many of us can go to a foreign country and say we've seen the head of the country with such pomp and pageantry carrying out a ceremonial tradition?
That was under some unique circumstances.
An entire street filled, center of the city.
The center of the city.
Yes, devoted to this. This is wonderful.
Now, aside from this, though, you can hear some chanting. But Dr. Major, you made a very fundamental point. Yes, there's chanting, but that's all part of our democracy, what the Bahamas is about.
Yes.
You have a right
as
to
long
express
as that
yourself.
chanting, yes, it's a
done
moment
with decency and
decency and decorum. You know, and that's what we are.
Democracy could be untidy, but still it must exist.
And I'm sure the police officers were aware or alerted to the fact that this may happen, but like you said, there's nothing, it doesn't seem from our vantage point, nothing untoward about it.
I got a notification on my
freedom
phone
of speech
this
we're all
morning
about.
that it would happen,
absolutely.
But, you know.
So Dr. Major, Governor General is
all rise.
Taking her position. She's taking her position on the throne, and you would see a wonderful chair just for her, and she will be sitting and just awaiting the arrival of the members of the House of Assembly.
Members of the House of Assembly, no doubt led by the Prime Minister, who will present the speech from the throne to the Governor General.
That is correct. That is correct.
Would the Progressive Liberal Party prides itself on passing these more than 100 bills, and like the Vice President of the Senate, the President of the Senate noted earlier, you know, that's a remarkable feat. I'm not saying that you should have remembered all of them, but certainly what perhaps stood out for you the most, apart from the Parliamentary Service Bill, if any?
I think the most, there were a number of bills that I believe touch persons in a very, very unique way, and the Parliamentary Service Bill was certainly one of them that stood out. There was some tourism bills in entrepreneurship, those that helps persons, that was able to be a very, very important part. I think I'm not. There are some bills that have been quite controversial that I'm watching very closely, and one of them is, of course, the marijuana bill. There's still some information and research that needs to be had in that regard. The bill that relates to
protection against
violence was an important bill.
And a very contentious bill.
A very contentious bill,
Which will probably go through further amendment as time goes on.
Well,
no doubt about it.
Considering you said that, women's groups have said that despite the bill being passed, they'll focus on making amendments to the bill. And as we noted in last night's show, then Minister of Social Services, Obi Wolskamp, he was open to those amendments being made. For you, Dr. Major, in terms of the gravity of that bill, and you know, not to dig so deep, but what do you think perhaps those an amendment should look like to that bill?
I'm not certain. I'm not certain what angle they're going to use, because it depends on how far we want to delve into its relationship between the gender, the women, and also some of the challenges that could come from that. So I'm not sure which angle they're gonna take. There's much more. It's almost like we want to follow the UN's recommendation, but at the same time we want to maintain our cultural ethos, and so I'm concerned a little bit about how far they're willing to go with this, and so that would certainly take some degree of research. House of Assembly, and you will see the enactment where he commands, in a very nice way, but in essence he will command the attendance of House members, and the House members will acquiesce, and then they will file directly to the Senate.
And the wording is very interesting, if I may specifically. We may not have heard it, but Her Excellency said to the Black Rod, you will proceed to the House of Assembly and command the immediate attendance upon me of the Honorable Speaker and the members of the Honorable House of Assembly. Of course, he will go and communicate that, and eventually the Black Rod will say, may it please Your Excellency that the command of Your Excellency has been obeyed.
Absolutely. So you can see it's the sovereign making a command, and the members acquiescing out of respect. And that's because of the traditions of the past and you would see. That's the rapping on the door. Yes. The door's closed, now the door is open. We will come to the bar of the House. No further than that.
Madam Speaker, I am commanded by Her Excellency, the Governor General, to command the immediate attendance of you, Madam Speaker, and members of this Honorable House of Assembly to the precincts of the Senate in Parliament Square.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Freetown.
Please, you, Madam Speaker, I rise to move the following resolution.
He's now moved. Yes, right.
Was appointed by proclamation dated the 12th day of August 2023 that the Parliament of the Bahamas be prorogued and that the next sitting of Parliament be held in the city of Nassau and shall commence in the forenoon of Wednesday, the 4th day of October 2023. And whereas it was appointed by the said proclamation that this Honourable House should meet on the 4th day of October 2023, and whereas it is the custom and tradition of this House to inquire and to know of His Majesty's representative, Her Excellency the Governor General, when she will be pleased to receive this Honourable House with its Speaker, and whereas it is conducive to good and democratic governance, that the business of this House, whenever and wherever possible, be open to and conducted in the presence of as many citizens of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas as practicable. And whereas Her Excellency the Governor General has summoned the attendance of members of the House of Assembly to the precincts of the Senate in Parliament Square, now therefore be it resolved that this Honourable House do now adjourn to meet immediately in the precincts of the Senate in Parliament Square as is commanded by Her Excellency the Governor General, where she will receive this Honorable House with its Speaker. Be it further resolved that this Honorable House be adjourned to meet immediately after the speech from the throne in this chamber. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder? Second. Thank you, Honorable Members. It has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be agreed. Whereas it was appointed by proclamation dated the 12th day of August, 2023, that the Parliament of the Bahamas be prorogued and that the next session of Parliament be held in the city of Nassau and shall commence in the forenoon of Wednesday, 4th day of October, 2023. And whereas it was appointed by the said proclamation that this Honorable House should meet on the 4th day of October, 2023. And whereas it is the custom and tradition of this House to inquire and to know of His Majesty's representative, Her Excellency, the Governor General, when she will be pleased to receive the Honorable House with his Speaker. And whereas it is conducive to good and democratic governance that the business of this House, whenever and wherever possible, be open to and conducted in the presence of as many citizens of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas as practicable. And whereas Her Excellency, the Governor General, has summoned the attendance of members of the House of Assembly to the precincts of the Senate in Parliament Square. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this Honorable House do now adjourn to meet immediately in the precincts of the Senate in Parliament Square, as is commanded by Her Excellency, the Governor General, where she will receive this Honorable House with its Speaker. Be it further resolved that this Honorable House be adjourned to meet immediately after the speech from the throne in this chamber. As many in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The resolution has been agreed. This House stands adjourned to meet in the precincts of the Senate in Parliament Square. We will now proceed to the precincts of the Senate in Parliament Square.
All rise.
Well, as you just heard, the House Speaker will lead House members into the precincts of Parliament Square. Once there, they will bow to Her Excellency, the Governor General, and that's upon approaching the dais. Her Excellency, the Governor General, will then acknowledge all members as they enter. Early on in the broadcast, we saw that Freetown MP was sitting at the end. He's now moved closer to the Speaker, and which seals his
prominence and importance. He is close to the Speaker and he's close to the Prime Minister.
As leader of government, leader of government business, and he just performed his first duty as
correct.
Leader of government business.
So he essentially moved from one end completely to the other. And that's a critically important role for him, and he needs to have the eye of the Speaker, and his position now makes it very easy for that to happen. And so I was just gonna say, so what the Speaker just did is they passed a resolution, and the resolution now being passed, so they're now filing to honor the passage of that resolution to hear the speech from the throne.
I think it was noted earlier that, off air that is, that House members are wearing a black band of sort, and it may
I noticed that quite a few of the men in particular, not the women so much, but the men are wearing black on both sides of parliamentary positions there.
So it may be in observance of
the passing of Obi Washington.
Certainly appears to be that way, and so now you will see this play out in Parliament Square with the members standing I'm sure they have a comfortable place where they will be. The speaker will be in front. Next to the speaker will be the clerk, and next to on the other side will be the prime minister. And the prime minister will give the governor general the speech, and then they will proceed.
So right now, as we indicated, the House Speaker has left the House of Assembly.
And what is important to note is you would see the mace being the symbol of the authority of the speaker in front of the speaker. Without that mace, there's no authority. And the clerk immediately behind the speaker. And then the prime minister immediately behind the clerk. And from this point on, you'll see the order of precedent. Deputy Prime Minister, and of course, Minister
Foreign Affairs
Fred,
Minister.
Absolutely.
Santa Martin, Education Minister.
And Labor and Immigration Minister.
Now you have the new speaker, the new leader of government business, that is Freetown MP Wayne Monroe.
Wayne Monroe is a quick study. I'm sure he's going to grasp it very well. He's interested in it, obviously, because that's a lot more work. That's added work on top of what you're doing. So you need to be organized, you need to be disciplined.
And a strong debater.
And a strong debater, yeah, because you're always negotiating something with the opposition and even your members. You are determining and dictating what happens on the agenda. Yeah. So you will be hearing his voice more than anyone going forward.
And oftentimes the agenda for that sitting will change.
Will change, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Dr. Major, in addition to the bills that the government is seeking to bring in this new legislative agenda, you noted earlier the cannabis bill. Another thorny issue there. It's a polarizing issue of those for and against, and it's just to create the regulatory framework to govern that industry, and a rather lucrative industry it is globally. What do you make of these efforts to diversify the economy in this regard? A lot of people are waiting on this, if not to tap in and, reap the rewards of it. And then a lot of people for other reasons in terms of giving me a break with having been arrested for small quantities of marijuana.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's a place for that. I think the critical thing, the devil's in the details. And the medicinal aspect of cannabis is a critically important area for me and for us to focus on. As far as the economic opportunities for persons, socially there's still social use of marijuana still is a vexing issue because of its some of the toxicities involved, and we're seeing now the Prime Minister take his position with next to the Chief Clerk and the Speaker, and there's a former Senate President to the right of the screen,
Lynn
Holowesko, who's also witnessing and observing these proceedings.
With regard to the cannabis medicinal sort of benefits, we're understanding now that CBD oil, could be an exceptional treatment for diabetes. So these are things that we really need to look at.
We need to look at.
We know the level of diabetes in this country is overwhelming.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine, a former member of Parliament, who passed, who suffered greatly during the latter parts of his sickness, his illness, and if it wasn't for the use of marijuana to bring some relief and to combat the nausea that associated with his treatment, he would have suffered greatly. So it certainly has its place in the marketplace in medicine.
But of course, regulation is key, as with anything.
Yeah.
Well, from this point, the Speaker, now that they've all assembled, the Speaker will move to the center aisle.
Yes, the Speaker will. The Speaker will be featured to the extent that she will. The Prime Minister will likely will be the person to present the speech to the
Governor General.
the Governor General. The Speaker's role now is to just be prominent. In some openings, the Speaker would speak to the ancient privileges and remind the Governor General that we were not impeached in getting here. There was nothing obstructing us or inhibiting us from taking our places. And sometimes you have to remind the Crown that you were able to come on your own accord. But it depends on how abbreviated we tend to do it in this case. So now we see the Prime Minister. Right. So we're getting ready to hear the speech from the throne.
Thank you. Madam President and honorable senators, Madam Speaker and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, as this is the first occasion upon which I am presenting my government's agenda in this assembly, I pray God's special guidance and blessings upon us all as we go about the business of the people of the Bahamas. We gather during a period of mourning and therefore note with great sadness the untimely demise of one of the senior members of the cabinet, the Honorable Obadiah Hercules Wilshire, Member of Parliament for West Grand Bahama and Bimini. My government has treasured his counsel and advice in contributing to the good management of the public affairs of our nation, both as Minister of Social Services and Urban Renewal, laterally as Minister of Social Services, Information and Broadcasting, and as a leader of business and government's business in the Assembly. We offer our deepest condolences to his family, friends, colleagues, constituents, and loved ones. May he rest in peace. Madam President and honorable senators, Madam Speaker, and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, my government came into office just over 2 years ago. At the time, the country faced many urgent crises. The national debt had skyrocketed, with the economy battered by a series of lockdowns and curfews. We had the worst unemployment crisis in our modern history. Our hospitals were overflowing with some patients receiving treatment in corridors and parking lots. Our schools were closed with no plans in sight to repair and to reopen them. Thousands of children were unable to participate in remote learning. And large numbers of people were traumatized from the passing of Hurricane Dorian and the experience of the COVID-19 pandemic. On coming to office, my government set out a 5-year program and committed to work in partnership with other nations, with our local communities, and most importantly, with Bahamian people to address the challenges that these crises posed. Now, 24 months later, less than halfway through the term, my government has already successfully implemented a significant number of policies, many of which are combined in my government's blueprint for change. The priority was to focus on policies which would rescue, recover, and begin to rebuild our economy. My government's most recent budget communication, a budget for security and progress, strongly attests to the success of my government's priorities and choices. Real GDP growth in 2022 was recorded at 14.4%, and GDP in nominal terms grew by 11.9%. A host of other key economic indicators confirmed that the public finances are being managed competently and well, that the economy had rebounded strongly, and that the country is now back on the right track. My government made a number of commitments for this fiscal year, focused on 3 pillars of national development: personal security, economic security, and national security. Soon after the passing of the budget, the Bahamian people came together in July 2023 to celebrate 50 years of independence under the theme, One Nation, Our Legacy, Our Future. Madam President and the honorable senators, Madam Speaker and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, the achievements of my government in alleviating the hardship of the Bahamian people and the many crises it inherited have since been tempered by unforeseen global factors. The Russian invasion of Ukraine had been a driver of higher oil prices. The invasion and disruption from economic lockdown during the COVID-19 pandemic caused enormous challenges in the global supply chain. While the economic chaos and hardships have hit virtually every country on the planet, we feel the effects strongly here in the Bahamas. The result is that things are still too tough for far too many people, especially the poor amongst us. We remain determined to do what we can to make things better. Mindful of the estimated 2,000 verses in Scripture that deal with issues of the poor, and committed to the ideals underpinning the genesis of its political foundation, my government retains a strong focus on helping to alleviate the misery of poverty. Our commitment is unwavering Though it may be difficult, and though it may take some time, we shall not fail or falter. We shall not weaken or tire as we seek to wipe every tear from every eye. My government's blueprint for change is the platform upon which it was elected. It is the mandate upon which it governs, and as such, we are resolved to deliver the programs it outlines for the short, medium, and long term. The priorities of this legislative agenda do not preclude anything in the blueprint. And so, the program outlined today highlights a number of specific legislative measures. Others will be introduced as needed and when required. In preparation for this new phase of our legislative agenda, my government has already announced changes in various cabinet portfolios, which include the creation of new ministries. In light of the recent and the sudden passing of Minister Wilshcombe, further changes will have to be made. Other changes in public service appointments are already underway. These changes will further support my government as it continues to build on progress made and drive new change in the country. In this next phase of the administration, my government will continue to intensify its focus on strengthening personal security, economic security, and national security. Madam President and honorable senators, Madam Speaker, and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, in continuing to intensify its focus on promoting personal security, my government's legislative agenda moves decisively to boost the number, type, and quality of jobs available to Bahamians. It wants to take an holistic approach to improving educational outcomes for all. We want to support the development of our young people and promote better health and wellness among the general population. My government firmly believes that the main path to greater personal security is through work and education. While the country currently enjoys one of the lowest levels of unemployment experienced in a long time, as yet, not everyone who wants a job has a job. And those who choose to start their own business and work for themselves still face too many obstacles. My government will actively enforce its policy of promoting and protecting jobs for Bahamians. As the father of the nation, former Prime Minister Sir Lyndon Pinling put it, my government will prioritize Bahamian jobs for Bahamian workers. A new unit will be formed to review notice of vacancy processes to ensure that Bahamians have a fair opportunity to apply for all available jobs that are created as our economy grows and diversifies. Tourism remains our #1 industry and the largest source of employment. My government will continue to advance measures not only to expand jobs and opportunities in the sector, but also to promote greater economic ownership for Bahamians. My government will establish in law a downtown management authority to oversee the continued revitalization of downtown Nassau. My government will implement the Family Island Airport Renaissance Project to accelerate the redevelopment of airports throughout the Bahamas. In its role as employer, my government will continue to implement measures to improve the working life of public service employees. Building on the progress already made in achieving an historic number of union agreements, my government will implement the first public service-wide promotion exercise in 9 years. Amendments to existing legislation will be proposed to prevent the current long-standing backlog of overdue promotions and reclassifications happening again. A public reform bill, a public service reform bill, will also be introduced to modernize the approach and governance of public servants. Madam President and honorable senators, Madam Speaker and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, my government is unshakable in its belief that education offers the best path to personal security, success, and happiness. Although we are making progress, my government is still battling with the many setbacks in education in recent years. The loss in learning for thousands of our young people, the lack of support for teachers and staff, the neglect of school buildings and material have taken a toll. Emblematic of the new approach which my government is taking is the National School Breakfast Program, for which a pilot scheme was launched 2 days ago. While the program has obvious nutritional benefits, researchers and teachers know that a child who starts the day with a healthy breakfast is more likely to attend school, more likely to participate in the classroom, and more likely to be a better learner. To encourage education and opportunities in the blue economy, my government will introduce a national maritime instruction and training bill to better support training in the workplace. My government will also present a national apprenticeship bill. And my government reaffirms its commitment to a pioneering, creative, and performing arts school, for which early preparation has begun and material being prepared for public consultation. In its ongoing support for the growth and development of the young people of our nation, my government will introduce a National Youth Commission bill. This body will be mandated to implement policies, programs, and projects consistent with the National Youth Policy to help support young people in developing their potential. Building on the success of the National Youth Guard, my government will introduce a national service bill that will invite our young citizens to register for national service. The participants in this program will serve to meet the needs of our vulnerable communities throughout the Bahamas. Reliable access to affordable health care is still out of reach for too many Bahamians. Notwithstanding its achievement in rescuing the healthcare system from near collapse, my government continues to build on lessons learned from COVID-19 pandemic to bolster our public health preparedness and healthcare delivery systems. My government continues to make investments to improve the healthcare infrastructure in New Providence, Grand Bahama, and throughout all the family of islands. This will include the introduction of a new telemedicine platform. My government will build a new specialty hospital in New Providence and will complete the construction of the new hospital in Grand Bahama. My government prioritizes public health, mental health and wellness initiatives, and is moving aggressively to implement the second phase of national health insurance with the introduction of catastrophic health care cover. This will make health care more affordable to all Bahamians. In order to address the global shortages of healthcare workers, my government will establish additional accredited medical programs and increase investment in healthcare training. My government will repeal and replace the current Stem Cell Act to tighten its regulatory framework. Legislation will be introduced for the health care and protection of older persons to provide for adequate care and attention for older generations of Bahamians on whose shoulders our country has been built. My government expresses its thanks and gratitude to healthcare professionals across the archipelago who continue to serve the people of this nation. Madam President and honorable senators, Madam Speaker and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, in promoting greater economic security for the Bahamian people and the country as a whole, my government's legislative agenda promotes growth and diversification in the economy. It introduces measures to combat the high and rising cost of living, boost development in communities throughout the Family Islands and in New Providence. provides support for housing, protects our natural resources, resolves long-standing issues relating to land, and advances a range of initiatives to develop the national infrastructure. My government will also introduce a number of bills to help grow and diversify our economy. In order to lay the strategic foundation for the future, my government will introduce the Bahamas National Development Plan bill. By putting the National Development Plan on a statutory footing, my government seeks to ensure that the next 50 years of our national life will have a fine strategic underpinning and focus. My government will introduce economic empowerment zone legislation. This will set out a range of initiatives and concessions to support specific industries and specify geographic areas. Intellectual property legislation will be introduced to protect the country's creative industries and empower our orange economy. This legislation will unlock paths to job and wealth creation. New opportunities will be created by legislation regulating cannabis and hemp. Several rounds of public consultation have already been completed, and my government notes the widespread enthusiasm amongst the public for this new health and economic sector. My government will propose legislation to introduce a yacht registry. A new legal profession amendment bill will be advanced that will establish a modern approach to the oversight of the legal profession. My government remains committed to development and innovation in the financial services industry. It is committed to compliance with international best practice while being innovative in new product and service development. A new securities industry bill will be presented that will ensure that our financial services industry and its regulation maintain the highest level of regulatory integrity. A new digital asset registered exchanges bill will also be advanced, which will ensure that our country continues to lead from the front and in the digital assets industry. Madam President and honorable senators, Madam Speaker and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, survey results from 2020 confirm what we all know. that the Bahamas remain one of the top 10 most expensive countries in the world. The high cost of living is a major cause of financial stress and the psychological distress in the country. In a number of sectors, poorer people pay disproportionately higher costs than the wealthier section of society. My government does not wish to overburden any sector of the community, but we do wish to make our economy fairer. In order to provide a better framework for businesses and consumers, my government will introduce the following measures. A new Registrar General bill to reorganize the operations of the Registrar's General Office. This will help to ease the burden of doing business in the Bahamas. My government will launch a new online company registry portal, which will help to make the process of registration more efficient. My government will also launch a new online civil platform to provide efficient, transparent services to Bahamians. My government is also mindful of the need to provide for greater protection of consumers and will therefore introduce consumer protection legislation. As the cost of energy is a sufficient driver of the high cost in the country, my government will undertake a root and branch review of the energy sector and has recently established a Ministry of Energy to implement effective, long-standing solutions. My government has already launched programs to install 100 megawatts of solar energy in Nassau, and now blended power facilities incorporating a minimum of 50% solar generation in 16 locations throughout the Family Islands. The introduction of renewable energy is a fundamental component of our promise to drive down the cost of electricity. My government remains especially committed to implementing clean energy in New Providence by moving to sources of renewable energy and becoming less dependent on fossil fuels. Building on these new efforts, my government will therefore introduce the following legislation. A new renewable energy bill that will provide a legislative and regulatory framework for the expansion of renewable energy generation. A new liquid natural gas bill that will provide a legislative and regulatory framework for development of LNG generation, which will provide and produce lower carbon emissions from the current system, along with the regulation of bunkering and blending LNG facilities in the Bahamas. A National Development Food Security Plan is being created. The objective of the plan is to achieve a comprehensive framework for food and agricultural development to promote investment, job creation, and environmental sustainability. My government will continue to build on the success of programs such as the Golden Yoke program to provide greater economic security for Bahamians in retirement and in times of need. My government will introduce a bill to amend the National Insurance Act and regulations and the National Insurance Chronic Diseases Prescription Drug Fund Act. My government will implement a new local government bill that will enhance the operations and responsibilities of local government throughout our family of islands. The government will also take local government concepts to our children, and so it will re-implement a junior local government council throughout the family islands. Frequently, it is our family islands that experience the brunt of the climate crisis, requiring continued rebuilding and infrastructure investment. My government will launch the Family Island Infrastructure Fund to encourage public-private partnerships and economic opportunities for Bahamians. To secure the economic and social sustainability of our various communities, my government will introduce a number of measures to strengthen social support. My government will present a new Urban Renewal Authority bill, which will provide for the establishment of an Urban Renewal Authority to improve the quality of life for residents in designated communities throughout the Bahamas. We will provide free access to the internet in low-income communities. This will help to ensure that every student in school can access the internet, so that no child is left behind because of their economic or social circumstances. My government will restructure the monthly assistance program for seniors or other eligible persons that can be used to cover the cost of food, electricity, or water. My government will fulfill its promise and increase benefits for persons with disabilities. My government will also provide the much-needed post-school age facility for persons with disabilities. Every Bahamian's quality of life should be enhanced by legislation which will be put forward to ensure public access and right-of-way to beaches by requiring at least one public access to every beach. Dignity and respect should also come at the end of life. And so my government will also introduce a funeral industry service bill to bring about a regulatory framework for the funeral home industry. My government considers housing to be a basic right of all Bahamian citizens and is committed to implementing robust programs and policies to expand opportunities for home ownership. My government is moving to aggressively complete the planned construction of 180 affordable homes and will provide additional new housing throughout the country. My government is acutely aware of the challenges climate change places on our built environment. Hundreds of critically needed homes on Abaco and Grand Bahama have not been rebuilt or remain significantly damaged since the passage of Hurricane Dorian. My government will accelerate the construction of new and affordable homes on Abaco and Grand Bahama. My government will create a sustainable rent-to-own housing initiative to create an additional pathway to home ownership for Bahamians, those Bahamians who are facing financial barriers. Our land, seas, and all natural resources are a part of patrimony and birthright of all Bahamians. A national forest bill will be presented to ensure that our green economy in general and our forests in particular are given the necessary regulatory framework to support environmental sustainability. My government will propose legislation to regulate mining, to provide a proper framework to prevent the unlawful exploitation of our natural resources. This will also provide a defined royalty framework so that it is Bahamians who benefit. The Bahamas Wildlife Enforcement Network Bill proposes to establish an armed law enforcement agency dedicated to enforcing all laws with regard to our nation's natural resources. One long-standing issue that our government will address in the upcoming legislative session is the security of property ownership. My government will do what many previous administrations have promised. It will enact appropriate legislation to deal with land registration and the adjudication of disputes. In this context, the government will amend the Environmental Planning and Protection Act to provide for a streamlined application of the environmental laws to Bahamian-owned small developments. Regulations will also be introduced under the Environmental Planning and Protection Act to allow for spot fines to be administered for violation of the act that will result in environmental damage. Madam President and honorable senators, Madam Speaker and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, in strengthening its focus on the country's national security, my government is concerned to ensure that our borders are well defended. disposed to have positive relations with our neighboring states in CARICOM, and all those with whom we enjoy friendly relations, determined to regulate the flow of migrants into our country, to arrest and reduce the incidence of crime, and ensure the long-term sustainability of our territory by making us more resilient to the negative impacts of climate change. In respect of our armed forces, amendments will be proposed to the Defense Force Act and regulations. These modernizing measures will help to continue to preserve discipline and good order in the Defense Force. A Royal Bahamas Defense Force Cadets bill will also be proposed to allow the current Royal Bahamas Defense Force Rangers to become a legislated youth arm of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. In respect to our relationships with other nations, my government will continue to ensure that our foreign policy objectives align and support our national priorities on climate change, food security, human rights and development, irregular migration, and other cross-border criminal activities. Our diplomacy will also focus on trade and investment, public health, and disaster preparedness. My government is greatly affected by the high volume of irregular migrants who travel to our shores. While we understand the plight of these persons, they are seeking refuge for a better life. The Bahamas cannot sustain the overwhelming numbers of persons. We will, therefore, continue to protect our borders. My government will introduce a bill to amend the Immigration Act to make new provisions and to be more responsive to the present realities of our immigration circumstances. Regulations will be introduced to govern the procedures at the detention center to ensure that it is operating optimally and in conformity with international best practices. The incidence of crime and the fear of crime continues to blight the lives of many of our people. Therefore, my government will introduce a compendium of measures to underpin its strategies in prevention, detection, prosecution, punishment, and rehabilitation. Several reforms will be put forward during the current legislative session. These include a National Security Council bill, a National Intelligence bill, and the Conditional Release of Offenders bill. Anti-gang legislation will be brought to Parliament that will provide for stiffer penalties and prison terms for numbers of and acts of criminal institutions and organizations. Amendments are proposed to the Firearm Act, which will require safety training for everyone licensed to possess a firearm. An amendment will be proposed to the Supreme Court Act to expand the number of Supreme Court justices by 5 in order to expedite and clear the backlog of cases. A new court services bill will empower the judiciary to operate autonomously by taking away oversight by central government. Thereby removing the bottleneck caused by the current system and providing further judicial independence. My government will introduce legislation to combat cybercrime. From time to time, other additional measures will be laid before you to support this ambitious agenda for change. My government understands that while we are, all of us, impatient for change, real change takes time. And while that change is underway, we must be mindful to ensure that those who struggle most, those amongst us whose lives depend on the rest of us being good neighbors, that we stand up, step forward, and reach out in their times of need. And so, my government remains grateful for the support of and partnership with the Bahamian people, and looks forward to continuing that support to build on further progress and drive new change. Now that the country is headed in the right direction, together we can work ever more fervently to achieve the kind of big changes so longed by the Bahamian people. I pray that the blessings of Almighty God rest upon your councils as you strive to bring about a better day, a new day in the Bahamas. I thank you.
Well, there you have it, the Governor General, Her Excellency Cynthia Pratt, finishing up on a nearly hour-long speech from the throne. Quite an ambitious agenda for the Davis administration going forward, and just some takeaways to begin with. On first occasion, this is her first speech from the throne, but she started off a speech noting that the country gathers at a period of mourning for Obie Wilsham, and whose advice she said her government has and will always treasure. Now, in terms of the blueprint for change moving forward, the Governor General foreshadowed that there will be continued efforts on strengthening economic, personal, and national security. There will be things of, we've heard about a public service reform bill to be introduced, and that's to modernize the approach of public servants. There is also, in terms of on the blue economy side of things, a national maritime and instruction bill to come, as well as a national apprenticeship bill. A performing arts school has also been noted here on the screen. We see that the judicial services just bowed to the Governor General, who, as we indicated, just finished up her speech from the throne, that from here she will give a final royal salute. There will be no inspection of the Guard of Honor at this point. We have a member of the, I think that is the Speaker of the House, Patricia DeVoe, bowing to the Governor General as well. She will be followed by, I'm thinking it may be Julian, the President of the Senate.
Yes, I think, yes.
That was the President of the Senate bowed earlier. And of course, you just saw the Speaker of the House. And as we indicated, there will be no inspection of the Guard upon the Governor General leaving to return to Government House. We will now return to some takeaways from the speech. And you also heard of a national service bill, Julian.
And really, to tell you the truth, for me, this is really an impressive agenda. And I hope that most of it can be implemented. For me, the national service bill stood out because that's, for me, a legacy bill. National service was one of the things that Sir Lyndon actually wanted to implement. I understand, but there was a real big backlash to it, right? But then if you remember, there are other things like the Defense Force and the national health and national insurance in itself that was opposed, and look how they have benefited us. So I think a national service bill, national youth service bill, will really do wonders for the country. If it's going to be what I suspect it is, it's kind of conscription. You may have to work in the armed forces for a year or so, like they do in places like Israel, but it builds up character and also gives them people who may have a tendency to go wayward, give them an opportunity to refocus. A lot actually focusing on the youth, but it seems to be also
a fair number of bills
in a lot of other areas.
Balanced in a number of areas.
A lot of stuff for older people.
Older people as well.
A lot of
the unemployed.
Exactly. When it comes to the creative economy, the orange economy, intellectual property, a performing arts school, there are a lot of things in here that are very promising, and like I said, I hope they can be implemented.
And we also heard the Governor General, as foreshadowed by the Prime Minister ahead of the actual speech from the throne, focus will be placed on tackling the high cost of living that we've been wrestling for quite some time.
Very important.
And the government seeks to not add any additional burden on Bahamians, but rather to make the economy work for them.
Well, we know if you can get the energy crisis under control for Bahamians, Bahamians will be overjoyed.
And speaking of the energy crisis, that's to the high energy sector is to be reviewed, and there's going to be an introduction of renewable energy, putting us less dependent on fossil fuel, more dependent
which we have
on
to do, yes. More solar and other...
More solar and LNG.
Exactly.
We're now looking at an image of the Governor General who has returned to the dais. She proceeds to the saluting dais, where Her Excellency will give a final royal salute, now playing the national anthem. Excellency proceeds to give the final salute from here. She will take leave of the Chief Justice, the Provost Marshal, the Commander of the Bahamas Defense Force, Royal Bahamas Defense Force, and proceed to the Government House. Now, Julian, you made a very good point. The speech is a well-balanced speech. There's something in there, a little something for everyone. And that includes, besides the young and the old, that also includes Family Islanders, and it also includes those who are disabled.
Exactly. But I'll tell you what's, before I forget, there's one thing in there that will make our mutual friend, Gowan Bowe, and several others very happy,
and that is the National Development
Plan bill, and it's supposed to cover a 50-year period.
A 50-year period.
So it seems like we're really moving on to the right track, and moving fairly fast at this point. So it'll be interesting to see how these are implemented, passed and implemented.
There is the Governor General. I think she just entered her vehicle to, as we noted earlier, return to Government House. And she returns to a Government House that has just underwent a multi-million-dollar facelift.
Right, not entirely completed yet,
not
but
entirely
at least
completed, but
for
livable.
work-wise, functionable. Not livable yet. She won't move in, I understand, until maybe the end of the year, maybe just before Christmas.
But she is the first Governor General in a very long time to actually have use of it. Exactly. And so that's quite a feat for her as well.
Dame Marguerite was there.
Dame Marguerite was there. His Excellency
really, I guess,
C.A. Smith.
C.A. Smith who was.
Exactly. And now we see House members exiting the tent where, well, really and truly the precincts of the Senate where the opening of Parliament has concluded. And they will now head into the House of Assembly. They will now head into the House of Assembly. And I understand that today in the House of Assembly, at least between 2 and 10 bills will be tabled. So this isn't all just ceremony for them. They're trying to get down to work pretty quickly. And considering what has been laid before them, they need to start moving very quickly.
There's only 3 years before the election cycle ends.
Exactly.
So if you're going to get, you're going to have to move quickly and firmly if you're going to get these things done.
And based on what we've been told, that these prorogations will happen more frequently now, perhaps in another 2 years. They have to see what they could get done before that timeline.
Listen, the whole idea of Parliament is to actually help and meet the needs of the people. So as those needs change, the legislative agenda has to change as well.
We can hear the Royal Bahamas. I think can't say if it's a combined band, but we can hear it's a combined Defense Force and Police Force band playing at the ceremony as House members and their spouses file back into the House of Assembly. Here on the screen now is Dame Marguerite Pinning being escorted by former Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Christie, I think, followed by
the Right Honourable Hubert Ingram.
Right Honourable Hubert Ingram.
It's always interesting when you see
you see one,
Mr.
you
Christie
see the other.
There's usually some smiles and laughter.
Yes, and I think that was the case exactly when Mr. Christie entered the tent. And I saw Mr. Ingram, the former Prime Minister, he had a wide smile on his face as if to say, you know, my old friend is here, you know, let it begin. So you still have a large crowd of people, I would think, line the streets of the road, standing behind barricades to witness, albeit the end of the public part or the portion of the ceremony that is in clearer view. They're still gathered there. For House members, like we said earlier, it's to get down to work at this point.
Another interesting I saw as far as what was outlined in the speech from the throne is the increase of 5 more justices. And also, even more important than that, allowing more independence to the judiciary.
More independence to the judiciary, which also speaks to where we're headed in terms of separation of powers. And we've made a step in that regard with the passing of the Parliamentary Services Bill. So all that comes into play. So, you know, David Forbes, Chief Clerk, at the opening of Parliament 2 years ago, he expressed a great deal of optimism that this government will have the wherewithal to make the separation of powers happen. And they're taking steps to say, we'll get it done.
Yes.
Now, in the speech from the throne, we also saw, like we said, for disabilities, there will be increased benefits for persons with disabilities. On the other end, there will also be increased restructuring, rather, of monthly assistance programs for seniors. So that's good news for them. The housing campaign will continue after completing the 180 homes already on the books. The government expects to proceed with building even more homes. So it's a pretty aggressive, ambitious agenda, 2023 agenda for legislators.
Absolutely. And when it comes to foreign policy, I was absolutely happy to hear this said, that our foreign policy, which is what it's supposed to do, will be highlighted by the needs of the country. So climate change, and we've seen the Prime Minister in all of his travels put that at the top of his agenda. Food security and human rights.
Food security.
On the diplomatic end, trade and investment being the key vehicles for the Bahamas there. Border control, of course, and dealing with illegal migration. Going to be amendments to the Immigration Act, upgrading of the detention center. All of these things are very important as we move forward.
Now, we've also heard that about the cannabis bill, and that which is now in several rounds of consultation. So the government is serious about proceeding with that, but of course not before hearing from the public in terms of what this bill should look like, which is crucial.
We need to have as many new sort of entrepreneurial efforts as possible and new industries. And of course, you have to be careful with cannabis. I believe we heard recently in the news that someone who died under very strange circumstances recently had, what they said, an overabundance of cannabis toxicity in his system. So that would, make some people a little wary. But there are great financial benefits from this industry, and the Bahamas should take advantage of them if we can.
There's also something in there for creatives. It's been foreshadowed, intellectual property legislation. So creatives would be very happy to hear that. Economic zones, initiatives and concessions to support specific industries. That's been foreshadowed as well. So these are bills to help grow and diversify the economy, but by the same token, the government is stressing that it hopes to lessen the burden on the people.
And of course, on the national health side, catastrophic bills, catastrophic issues to be targeted, which is really the important thing. I mean, particularly as people get older, and a lot of the problem in general insurance with a lot of people now is that when they do get to the age where they need these private insurance agencies to protect them, they find themselves not being eligible.
Exactly.
So a catastrophic national health insurance bill is very, very critical.
At this point, the Chief Justice, President of the Court of Appeal, followed by the Justices of the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court, they're all proceeding to the Supreme Court in Bank Lane. We can also tell you that the spouses of members of the Senate, both houses, that's the Senate and the House of Assembly, well, as you saw earlier, have proceeded to the chambers, to those respective chambers. And from there, the President and members of the Senate, preceded by the Black Rod, will proceed to the Senate chambers, and all invited guests will be directed by protocol officers. Now, ceremonies of such are usually followed up by receptions as well.
There's usually a reception to follow this event. At Government House, I presume that it will be there. But it gives everyone a good feeling that you can actually be back at Government House. And we experienced that a few weeks back with the outgoing ceremony for Cornelius Smith.
Exactly.
And the incoming Governor General the following day. So it's good that we are getting back into that place that really has a lot of history. You know.
Well, we have senators now taking their seats.
Taking their seats again.
And I suppose that the House proceedings will begin, or if they haven't already, will soon begin. The Governor General, we also heard her say that in the next phase, in light of Obie Wolskam's passing, further changes will have to be made. Of course, we witnessed one this morning in terms of leader of government business now being assumed that responsibility by Freetown MP Wayne Munro, but there is still entire cabinet portfolio.
Well, it shows really the actual contribution that Obie Wolskam made and continued to make up to the time of his death.
And this opening of Parliament indeed comes as the government and Obie Wolskam's family prepares for a state funeral that's set for next week. So in the midst of celebration, they must turn around quickly and bury one of their own, bury one of the country's own, the son of the soil, who, like you said, made remarkable contributions and whose legacy will live long after.
He was such a powerhouse in the House of Assembly, too. You'll miss that kind of dynamic coming from him, of course.
Right, and you know, one of those parliamentarians who could deliver a speech
without a speech in hand.
Without a speech in hand.
Yes, most of his contributions were not written.
Not written at all.
That's a special gift, yes.
And I don't think it came down to notes just off the top of his head.
Probably the notes were all in his head.
In his head. But nothing to pass on to reporters. You know, so Obie Wolskam will certainly be missed by Bahamians, but of course his cabinet.
You may be aware of this, but you know, back in the day,
you should not
reporters, you're not supposed to have
written speeches, correct.
So you had to stay awake and
so we
take
got quite
really
spoiled.
copious notes.
We got spoiled to have speeches. Yes, you had to take notes, lots of notes, and take them down very quickly. And so that required a lot of attention.
Yeah, certainly.
You know, but things have changed, and
still, I guess we'll start up the proceedings in the Senate very soon. I don't think that these proceedings will continue for a long time. They should be fairly short, I presume. I think you mentioned that there may be up to 10 bills tabled.
I've been told in the House of Assembly it could be between 2 and 10 bills to be tabled
that
today.
should happen fairly quickly as well, because you're only tabling them.
Yes. And despite New in his role, the leader of government business would have been told about what's to take place today prior to today.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how Wayne Munro performs in that capacity.
For a time, he will be measured up to Obie Wolskam, and that's expected. But I'm sure he will bring his own flair to being leader of government, own flair, but there are rules to follow and responsibilities that are set in stone.
Well, that's the interesting thing, too. I think we got that there's going to be stricter adherence, not that they've violated the rules, but then stricter adherence to the rules of both the upper chamber and the lower chamber.
Right, as laid out by both the House Speaker and the President of the Senate. So right here, we're just watching people leaving precincts of the Senate where...
Amazing the amount of people who attend this, huh?
It's amazing the amount of people who have taken their lunch breaks or who have left work to gather on the side of the road. But you know, this is what it's all about. And how often do you see these things?
That's true.
Yeah, and especially with a new Governor General.
Absolutely. Not everyone is as fortunate as us to have the sort of vantage point that we have. Both you and I have worked the House of Assembly. So
yes, for many years.
And worked events like this at Rawson Square, at Parliament Square.
We go now to our Shoshana Rowe Farquharson, who's down in Parliament Square. Shoshana?
An extensive speech from the throne outlining the government's plans over the next few years. Join me now is iconic broadcaster, the one and only David Bartlett. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Always a joy being here with you. I believe that we were able to participate in what I consider a tribute to democracy in this country, given the fact that this all started in 1729. And when we see the diversity, it was bitter, it was sweet, it was classy, world class. We had little protests outside, but we had such substance in that speech from the throne. And don't forget the fashion. Bahamians dress the best in the world.
Let's talk a little bit about the fashion, because it has changed over the years. This isn't your first opening of Parliament. I'm sure you've covered many. Back then it was dark. Now we're moving to the colors. What are your thoughts? What are your impressions? And of course, we have to talk about what some of the ladies had on. I mean, just outstanding.
What I believe the dress code is, it has preserved the dignity. You know, because you can change and change inappropriately. Right. You know, I still came in my black because that's what I grew up in. That's way back in the 80s in the opening of Parliament. And it was, as I recall, a cardinal sin to wear anything else. But when you look at the different pastels and I love the fascinators. Oh my goodness, and you know, you're looking at, Vogue needs to come to the Bahamas to see how elegantly we dress, and our Bahamian men who are in their nice tailored suits. And so I like that change, and I like it because it has changed in color to diversify some, but it's maintained the dignity, the conservative approach to looking classy.
A new legislative agenda, new governor general, a new way forward. What is your impression on the speech from the throne?
I think it's comprehensive. I love, when I say bittersweet, of course, the Speaker of the House talked about this being the hardest, the toughest words was what she said, that she's journeyed since she has been in Parliament. And so I believe it was a tough moment for all of the colleagues of the Honorable Obadiah Wilscombe, and certainly those of us here in the broadcasting world who he mentored and impacted directly or indirectly. Of course, I am always happy to enthusiastically say that he made a world of difference in my life, and I'm sure that if every journalist in the newsroom under his tutelage, under his leadership, were able to get to the mic, they would say pretty much the same thing, notwithstanding that you never always agree, and that's what life is. On the legislative agenda, I like how it was transparent and honest and admitted, for example, that there's a disappropriate of taxes to the poor, and it spoke to, well, what is the solution? The personal, the national, and of course the national security and the economic security of the people of the Bahamas. I believe if the government were to pursue that, to be intentional and strategic in how we increase ownership for Bahamians. I believe the justice system, the announcements made, would help facilitate and accelerate the backlog of cases. When justice is not swift, wickedness grows in the hearts of man. We talk about the health. We talk about, let's go back to what Sir Lyndon wanted to do a long time ago with the National Service for our youth, so that we can now have an organized, expanded, and really going back to the original plan to get the future together.
Very quickly, in 10 seconds, the Honorable Wayne Monroe now sits as leader of government business. What's your take on that?
I think it's a wise move. I believe that there were several other options, and I think he's as good as any, and I believe that we are in for a very progressive, and, you know, he has a dry sense of humor. He started out there with Rodney Bunker, and so he's down to earth, and he knows right how to go right to the Privy Council, so I think it's a good choice.
Thank you very much. Back to you guys in studio.
Well, thanks, Shashina. Despite, through it all, though, we see, like she indicated, the change in dress codes over the years, but despite it all, we also see that reverence and tribute was paid to Obi Bolshkam, even with the bands that gentlemen wore around their arms. And so Obi Bolshkam may not have been there in body, but he
certainly was there.
Certainly was there in spirit.
And I believe, well, I can tell you, he's had a personal impact on me in that he was the one who brought me to the Broadcasting Corporation, so I will always remember that. But now I believe we have a tribute to the late Obadiah Hercules Bolshkam.
Reverend Higgs said a wonderful prayer this morning. He said, the true leaders, and he said there are two types, one that takes after the flock and one that takes after the fleece. Not suggesting you go after that. I'm suggesting that we're not taking care of the flock. And he said at the end of the day, he ended his prayer by saying at the end of the day, when all the true leaders are gone, you know what's going to happen? The people are going to say we did it ourselves. That's what's happening right now. The people are doing this. The people have caused us to be in this place right now. Some ordinary folk, some Rastafarians, who went out there and they said they're going to probe and probe and probe, and they're going to fight the system, and they're going to ensure that there's justice in the system. And you've got to appreciate what they're doing. This is people's action. And that's what makes this thing so very serious, because they're not just accepting us, either side. They're not going to accept us saying, okay, it's being handled. Because as far as they're concerned, it's not being handled.
Obadiah Hercules Bolshkam leaving quite an impact on the Bahamas, and his state funeral preparations being made for that next week. We understand that it's likely it will be held here in New Providence. We cannot say where his burial will take place, but a state funeral nonetheless. And we see there's still a few other people downtown at this moment. And this, despite the speech from the throne being over, this is a time to, you know, I have on a nice dress, let everyone see it. It's a celebratory time.
Or what?
And these people will, of course, proceed to Government House for the reception. We take it now to our team down there in Parliament Square.
Well, that was the opening of Parliament for 2023. A busy day for all you guys in the studio, and definitely a busy day for us down here covering all of the events. So much to see. Sean, what's your take on what you saw during the proceedings for the morning?
Well, of course, very well attended. We were in the main hall that seated approximately 2,500 people. But by police estimates and of those of the protocol officers, they had about 1,800 people were in attendance. But of course, well attended. All the finery, the words pomp and pageantry were not lost on this event in any way, shape, or form. But of course, as also we saw the lady of the hour, the Governor General, Dame, I don't know if she's Dame, Her Excellency Cynthia Mother Pratt, delivering the speech from the throne as she would do in this normal fashion, and of course covering any number of topics, wide-ranging from national security to natural resources being protected, assistance given to, of course, our brothers and sisters in the family violence, and also to promotions, and also any number of things that I would like for you ladies to expand on.
Well, definitely a number of stuff, which for you, Shoshana, you were here for most of the morning as well. What do you take away from this experience? I find that this particular opening seems to be bigger than past openings or speeches from the throne. We here in an air-conditioned tent, the red carpet fully rolled out for all of the guests here. What are the takeaways for you?
Well, certainly bigger, better, prestigious. From you entered the red carpet, security was strictly enforced, and so if you were not allowed to be here, if you did not have an invitation, you were not allowed inside. Of course, like you would have mentioned, Sean, very, very well attended, very well organized from beginning to the end. As far as the speech from the throne, I'm a Grand Bahama girl, and so of course what really stood out for me and Grand Bahama are two of our most plaguing issues. That's healthcare. We would have heard that in the next legislative agenda, the government is going to push forward with a new hospital. Very important for us. An airport is equally as important for Grand Bahama. And then housing. Since the passage of Hurricane Dorian, many residents are still without home. The Prime Minister basically spoke to, from the speech from the throne, the aggressive push for housing on the island of Grand Bahama and Bimini, and so that is very important.
So do you find that the speech will set, I guess, a very busy, continued legislative agenda for parliamentarians?
Yeah, and I think it continues from what we saw the government did before. Before 100 bills, legislative bills were passed. Some of those that were not passed are going back on the table. And so that is equally important. NHI, mining for natural resources. A number of other things that were not passed in that past session will be put back on the table, and I think that's important for the people.
Well, thank you so much, Sean and Shashina. That has been our live coverage of the opening of Parliament 2023. I'm Jiminita Swain. Back to you in studio, Julian and Makushla.
Now, Julian, like we said, the celebration continues at Government House, Mount Fitzwilliam. For legislators, however, the Senate and the House of Assembly, the proceedings will continue there.
The work just begins.
And the work begins.
And they've got a lot to do, so it'll be interesting to see it.
Well, that ends our broadcast of the 2023 opening of Parliament. For Julian Reed, our team down in downtown, and that includes our Shashina Rowe-Farquharson, Jiminita Swain, Sean Innes, and myself. Thank you for joining. And again, the reception continues at Government House, Mount Fitzwilliam. Thank you for joining us.